Story 1. My wife had an affair with my best friend, who is also my cousin. Now she is emotionally manipulating me while taking responsibility. Long-time reader, first-time contributor. Firstly, I'd like to start by saying that my wife was always a good wife, and she has made a huge mistake that is out of character that might cost us our marriage. So please keep that in mind as you read on. I have a cousin who was also my closest friend. As my closest friend, he was often at my house when I lived with my parents, and he continued to visit me frequently after I got married. I have been married for 3 years. During these visits, my wife, who is normally shy and reserved around my friends, began to hang out with us from time to time because he became very familiar with his constant visits, and she saw him as a cousin of hers as well. It's also important to note that my wife has some undiagnosed mental illnesses such as borderline personality disorder, BPD, seasonal depression, and unresolved abandonment issues from her childhood. Anyway, eventually my wife began to join my cousin and I when we would hang out together outside of the home as well, and we regularly started hanging out all together, which I didn't think was an issue because I was always around. I now know that I was essentially setting myself up for failure by helping them create a bond. Fast forward to this past weekend, and after weeks of my wife constantly crying and feeling depressed beyond anything I've ever seen, which I had put down to her existing mental health issues, she confessed to me that the reason why she has been feeling this way is because of overwhelming guilt about having developed an emotional attachment to another man. At this point, she was completely distraught and could barely get her words out. So I simply comforted her while trying to hold in my shock and anger at what I had just heard. Mind you, at this point I thought she was just messaging a random guy on Instagram and she started catching feelings for him and felt really bad about it. But it was much worse than that. She eventually confessed that it had been going on for some time. 12 months since her first feelings that she suppressed, 9 months since they started talking on and off, 3 to 4 months since they started talking every day, and 2 months since they confessed that they had these feelings. They have both said individually that they tried to end it at that point but couldn't do it straight away, and things became romantic without getting physical. My cousin eventually ended things officially around 4 weeks ago. Also note, I spoke to my cousin, and he confessed without him knowing that my wife had told me that he was her affair partner, and their stories matched up. So, at least their stories matched up. So now that you're all caught up, I need some advice. Is there any way that this marriage is reparable? Or should I just move on and find someone that I can actually trust? Because I definitely cannot trust her right now, and I'm not sure if I will ever again. I've spoken to 2 sheiks, one individually and one with my wife, and they've both advised me to not rush into any decisions. But one told me to wait 2 to 3 weeks, and one told me to wait 4 to 6 months. The one who told me to wait 4 to 6 months then later told me that I might have to end things sooner if my wife's mental condition doesn't improve because the marriage seems unsustainable. My wife and I are both 25 and have no kids. What makes this decision even more difficult is that I feel I have to consider my wife's mental health in making a decision. She is manic at times and often says she doesn't want to live anymore because of what she's done. She's filled with guilt, but she's also admitted to me that she's still grieving the loss of the friendship she had with my cousin, which makes my blood boil. The sheik said this is normal but to monitor if she still feels this way in the next few months. I'm really annoyed and angry because I've always been a pretty stress-free person, as well as someone who's very loyal and family-oriented. So not only has this been the biggest betrayal imaginable, apart from things getting physical, but it has also made me dread upcoming family gatherings where my cousin will be, and I will be expected to bring my wife, because of course no one in our family knows about this. My wife is very clear that she only wants to be with me and she wants to make this marriage work more than anything, claiming she would die for me and would rather die than hurt me again. I know it's dramatic, but that's how she is. I've known her my entire adult life, and even though our marriage is not perfect, we've been pretty compatible so far, and I simply can't imagine life without her. Even though she's hurt me in the most unimaginable way. I really didn't want to go through making this story public, but I feel desperate and lost. If anyone has been through anything similar or knows of anyone who has, your advice would be appreciated even more. Thanks if you've read the whole thing. Update 1. So it's been 2 months to the day since D-Day, and I've been through all the emotions of grief in that time while trying to wait the 2 to 4 months that different sheiks recommended as not to rush my decision. In these 2 months, my wife and I have had our ups and downs, but to be honest, it's been mostly downs due to my ongoing depression about the situation. The UPS have been laughing about things and goofing around sometimes like old times, but I often quickly remember what she did and my face physically drops, especially in the earlier weeks. Nowadays, I spend most of my time trying to stay distracted by playing football, going to the gym, spending time at the mosque / with good brothers, etc. Some days I spend as little time around my wife as is reasonably possible because when I'm with her, I'm faced with a lot of confusion. I obviously still have affection towards her, but she hurt me in an unbelievable way. I also find myself thinking a lot more clearly when I'm not with her, and then when I'm with her, I'm confused again. In terms of her behavior at home, she has been extremely loving, as is her nature, and continues to be a good wife in terms of looking after the home, making me breakfast before work, packing my lunch, etc. However, her negative personality traits such as her temper / foul language have reared their ugly heads, as well as some other issues which I'll touch on a bit later in the post. In the weeks and months since the confession, she has been mostly understanding and patient, but every now and again she cracks and has enough of me bringing it up. I've brought up the issue pretty much every day, a lot more often in the first 6 weeks, but I still do it now. I know this isn't good, and it isn't because I love talking about the issue. It's because it's still at the front of my mind. I've seen a psychologist 1 session so far and have continued seeing a sheik for counseling, and we saw the same sheik as on D-Day for marriage counseling. Our main issue is that my wife does not respect me fully as a man. Her words are that she respects me fully as a person, especially for my character, but only respects me partially as her man because she needs certain things such as more complete emotional support, someone who will be more adventurous with her. She loves hiking, long road trips, etc., and she picks on my driving as something that makes her lose respect for me. I've stated to her and to our marriage counselor that I believe that she doesn't value the traits that I bring to the table, being patient, respectful, providing for her, helping her improve in the religion, as respectable traits in a man, even though she does see the virtues in them. They're not as high value for her as they might be for other sisters, although I wouldn't know because unlike her, I haven't had intake conversations with anyone else outside my marriage. I personally think that she is being unreasonable because I have tried really hard to be a good husband. We did our marriage when I was 21 and moved in together when I was 22, and from when I was 19 and knew we were going to get married, I started a business to make more money to pay for the wedding and start a life together. This was on top of my full-time university degree and a part-time job, on top of finding time to spend time with her and do the things she liked doing such as hiking, going on road trips, etc. We did the whole going to places together but not touching thing, which I now realize was still really not permissible, and I feel like that might have cursed our marriage. Anyway, I worked so hard that I hardly slept, and I ultimately fell asleep behind the wheel and crashed my car. Praise be to God. I somehow didn't hit any cars and only swerved into some grass. I brought this work I've done for us up to her, and she said that's my duty and then asked why I hadn't highlighted it before, as if she would have respected it more if I had made it clear. It's not healthy that we've developed this silly point-scoring exercise because that's not what marriage is about. Despite all of this, she still holds resentment towards me and says it openly. Part of that resentment is because I wasn't aware and possibly emotionally mature enough to sacrifice more things during our marriage, mainly the fact that I played football 3 to 4 days a week for a few hours, and she claims this abandonment was a contributing factor that led to her abandonment and subsequently led to her affair. She claims full responsibility for the affair with the affair partner but says that it's important to understand the reasons for what drove her to that point because she doesn't have a long history with men or anything like that. The marriage counselor agreed that it's important to understand how we got to that point as well. To be honest, I'm baffled as to how someone who's had an affair and their spouse reacts in a composed way and still doesn't disrespect her can still turn around and say that she lacks any kind of respect for her husband. She says she really respects me for how I dealt with it and again, fully respects me as a person but not as her man, which is a different category for her apparently. The things I see as manly and what she sees as manly are clearly two different things. Finally, I had obviously cut off regular contact with my cousin, the affair partner, but in the last 10 days or so, I've had to talk to him because the family has been hit with a major issue. One of our cousins went missing and was found to be using medications and was stuck in a medication house, and our family looked to us to lead the investigation and help find a solution because we're all 40 days apart in age, myself, the affair partner, and the medication user. Praise be to God. She is now safe and back with the family, so we can cut off contact again. But this incident has reminded me that it will be impossible to keep my cousin out of my life, and the thought of him and my wife even being in the same room makes me want to die inside. One of them has avoided each family gathering so far. So here we are. I'm still extremely confused, to be perfectly honest. In the first 6 weeks, I was leaning heavily towards walking away, but in the last couple of weeks, I have started to feel responsible for not being the perfect husband, even though I spent a lot of time being her shoulder to cry on, spent many nights reaching out to her friends asking them to reach out to her because she needs their support, and even trying to cheer her up after she's verbally abused me. She says this is because of her anger and mental health issues that she's working through, but she still gets really angry. By the way, I've asked my wife if she expects me to be the complete husband, and she said no, but something close to it. She feels that that's what she needs. This obviously still consumes my mind. I've struggled to be efficient with my work. For example, it's around midday where I am, and I've basically gotten nothing done in the office so far today. I spend a lot of time reading forums about marriage affairs, watching lectures about the issue. I think I've watched all of them, so I'm back to Reddit and messaging my wife with more issues. This isn't healthy for either of us. The marriage counselor says I need to decide sooner rather than later whether I'm looking to commit or go our separate ways, and if I was to commit, that our marriage needs a lot of work. Sorry for ranting on, and I'd be surprised if anyone read all of that. Regardless, any advice is welcome, especially if you've been in a similar situation. Update 2. This week my wife and I divorced after being married for 3.5 years. It was very sad. She got extremely emotional and I also shed some tears, but I believe it had to be done as I couldn't look past the affair. At the moment, my wife is in the process of moving back into the home we shared, and I'm going to live with my parents for the remainder of her waiting period. She came to the house today, and in the evening she asked me if we can talk about some things because she was not happy that I was in a bad mood towards her today and had mentioned the issue a few times. She knows the reason why the issue came up today was because I'm having aunties calling me and even coming over to try to get me to give my wife a second chance, and I find this very triggering because they don't know what I've gone through, plus all the things I've hidden from them, such as the fact that she had an affair, to protect her dignity and reputation, which is the right thing to do, and to not reveal that the affair partner is their nephew and my cousin. It's extremely infuriating because they all see her as a kind girl that's very sweet, which she is at times, but they don't know what I've gone through with the affair and with all the verbal abuse and temper issues throughout the marriage. I always shielded my family from seeing this side of her because I was always able to keep my cool, so there were never any major incidents they would hear about if I'd also lost my cool. She's also really good at being the best version of herself around others, particularly family. It goes down to her cultural roots and how she was raised. There are a lot of good things about her personality and character that I would look for in another wife, so that should be made clear. Anyway, back to the issue that she wanted to talk about. I told her that I didn't want to talk about things right now, but she insisted and kept talking about it anyway, saying that we won't have any other time to talk because I'm going to my parents tomorrow. So she began asking why I've forgotten all the good she did and the sacrifices she made in our marriage and that I'm just labeling her for one thing she did. I insisted it wasn't just one thing, and I said that I haven't forgotten about all the good because if I had, I wouldn't be treating her with kindness. I would be cold to her like I am to her affair partner / my cousin. I was then alerted to news that one of my ex-colleagues and a friend was being rushed to hospital after a serious car accident, and she became even more upset that I was diverting my focus from our conversation, which I said I wasn't ready to have anyway, and said that this is symptomatic of our problems in the marriage where she always had to fight for my attention and that's what caused this problem between us. I'm so flabbergasted by her lack of empathy when she's in that kind of mood. It's just so bizarre because she's not an inconsiderate person when she's in a stable mood. She also said that, for the record, after some time she would have forgiven me for cheating if I had done what she had. I think that's a load of horse crap if I'm honest. She's a very sensitive person and can't even handle the perceived threat of being abandoned. So if she found out that I had an emotional relationship with another woman, let alone a relative of hers, she would lose her mind. If her family found out, her brothers would probably have broken my legs, I swear. Tonight she made me feel like I was the one that had the affair. She even fell down to her knees crying, "Why?" I thought in my head, I'm pretty sure that's my line. I should be the one saying that and falling in despair after what happened. The last thing I want to do is lose faith in being able to find someone who will appreciate the qualities that I do have. When she starts speaking about the things I did wrong and the part one had to play, I do start to get defensive, I won't lie, but that's because it's really hard to compare not being attentive enough and not having more deep and meaningful conversations with actual cheating. So the reason why I'm asking all of this is, do I owe it to her to have these final discussions about where things went wrong in our marriage so she can get some closure, or do we just stop talking about the issue entirely and move on separately? I am trying to do everything by the holy book in habitual practice and not take away any of her rights from her regardless of how the marriage ended. I want both of us to be able to heal from this marriage ending. I've been advised that I have to prioritize myself in this, but I can't pretend I don't care about her well-being, and I want to increase both of our chances of being able to remarry in the future if God wills, because a fresh start would be healthy for everyone involved. I've always tried to carry myself with respect and honor, even in the face of this most heinous betrayal. So any advice from people who have been divorced or advice from married brothers/sisters on tips on how you would handle this situation, I would greatly appreciate it. Update 3. I found out 3 months ago that my wife cheated on me, emotional affair, with my first cousin and best friend. They were speaking secretly for up to 12 months, but it was romantic for approximately 3 months, give or take. I cut my cousin out of my life immediately, and after 3 months of tossing and turning, trying to see if I can get past the betrayal, I asked my wife for a divorce a week ago today. My STBXW has been deeply remorseful since the affair, but I've just been unable to let it go, especially because she still exhibits some of the toxic traits that have put a strain on our marriage, such as a vicious temper and emotional manipulation. For example, a few days after I asked for a divorce, she sent me a photo of her eating alone at a cafe and said, "I better get used to eating alone. If this isn't emotional manipulation, someone please correct me." My STBXW is also in the process of being diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, BPD. She's had a provisional diagnosis, and it's pretty obvious to me, her, and her psychologist that she has it. My STBXW's remorse was the only thing that made me consider staying in the marriage, but even though she continues to say that she takes full responsibility, she says that there are things I did that led her to doing what she did. For example, we have different ideas of a nice Saturday. I'm more of a homebody, and she loves the outdoors, so I would only be up for a long drive to the countryside or a faraway beach every now and again, but she would want to do something like that a few times a month. So she says me constantly rejecting her led to her affair. She also attributes some of the blame for putting her in the situation by inviting my cousin to the house to occasionally stay over because he lives over an hour away. My cousin and I would have sleepovers regularly before I got married, and I now realize that it should have stayed in the past, but I could never imagine that it would lead to the two of them cheating together. To clarify, we've been on plenty of road trips in the 7 years we've known each other, as well as 3 international trips, despite the pandemic and the fact that we're 25-26, so it's hardly like we've had some boring, dormant marriage. For context, my STBXW is very loving overall, especially in her good times. She takes care of the home very well, she always took care of me when I was ill, and we always got along for the most part, to the point where we could be good friends if we weren't married, although we don't have a lot in common. It's hard to explain. So my question is my STBXW's remorse and responsibility taking genuine if it comes with the caveats of me also taking some of the responsibility for the part one played? Also, is it fair enough that even though she's remorseful, that I can't get past it because it was such a huge betrayal, a double betrayal actually? Plus, is it normal that my attraction levels to her have dipped immensely? I've never been a person that's prioritized looks, so when I married her, it was more for her personality and how well we got along more than anything, and the physical attraction grew over time. So is it normal that now that she's not exactly the person I thought she was when I married her, that I'm less attracted to her in general? I'm also confused because I don't resent her as a person. I still want good for her in her life. She's a good person overall, but I can't get past what she did, and I can't trust my own judgment or her intentions if I were to get back with her. Her BPD also complicates things because she could be the sweetest girl one minute and then be yelling and swearing at me the next. She knows that I don't like swearing, we're both religious, and I don't swear at all. Yet she's continued to swear when yelling at me in our 3 years of marriage. She's also said cruel things such as that she doesn't fully respect me as her husband because I don't do X, Y, and Z that she finds respectable in a man, yet she overlooks all the things that I've done for her over the years, including never really losing my cool and putting up with years of abuse, mood swings, and being there for her as much as I could because people with BPD are more emotionally needy than others in some ways, through no fault of their own. She's taken back a lot of the comments post-separation, but I feel like maybe she's just saying the right things because she wants me back. Overall, I'm tired. I'm tired of being the nice guy, tired of being stepped all over, tired of having to worry about if being divorced will destroy both of our reputations, tired of keeping my cousin's role in this a secret from everyone except my therapist and counselor. It would destroy my family. And I'm tired of wondering if I'm doing the right thing by walking away or if I'm leaving a good thing too soon, even though when I think rationally, it doesn't feel like it. Sorry for the rant, this is all still pretty fresh. I guess the months haven't really dulled the pain. I still think about it every single day. When does that stop? Update 4. I've recently started realizing that she's very emotionally manipulative. For example, a few days after I asked for a divorce, she sent me a photo while she was out and said, "I better get used to eating alone." I called her out on this, and she denied that she was trying to manipulate me. Just now we were sitting on the couch. I'm still in the process of moving out. And we had the following conversation pretty much word for word. Wife: I wonder what it'll be like to be forever single. Me: here comes the emotional manipulation. Wife: I'm just saying stuff, not saying it to you. Me: just keep it in your head then, so you're not manipulating me. Wife: I don't care if you hear or what you do with the information. You're actually the worst man I've ever met. Am I right to call this out as manipulation? Or is she really just thinking out loud? Now on to the next story. Story 2. My grandfather made me a special gold pocket watch worth over $45,000. But my sister stole it after he died and sold it to her boyfriend's dad. So, I'm taking them both to court to get it back. My grandfather was a master watchmaker who owned a small shop for 45 years. His most prized possession was a custom pocket watch he designed himself. It's gold with intricate engravings and has been featured in several horology magazines. The watch has a unique double-case design with our family crest engraved on the inner case, and the movement inside contains several innovations my grandfather developed throughout his career. My grandfather always said the watch would go to the first grandson who pursued a career in engineering, as he believed engineering was the modern evolution of his craft. I studied mechanical engineering, worked hard through college, and even took special courses in watch mechanics to honor his legacy. In my final year of university, I completed a thesis project on the evolution of watchmaking techniques, using my grandfather's methods as a case study. He attended my graduation and told everyone at the celebration dinner that I would be carrying on his legacy. When my grandfather passed away 5 years ago, my entire family acknowledged that the watch should come to me based on his wishes. The problem started when my sister took the watch from our grandfather's belongings before anyone could properly divide his things. She volunteered to help clean out his house while I was dealing with arrangements for the memorial service. When I asked about the watch afterward, she claimed grandfather secretly told her he changed his mind and wanted her to have it because she appreciated beautiful things more and had an eye for artistry that I supposedly lacked. This made no sense, given everything he'd said over the years, but I didn't want to cause drama during a time of grief. Last month, I discovered my sister sold the watch to her boyfriend's father, who's some kind of vintage watch collector. She didn't even tell anyone in the family. I only found out because the boyfriend's father posted about his incredible acquisition on a watch collectors forum that I follow. He mentioned getting it from his future daughter-in-law, and included photos that clearly showed my grandfather's watch. He described specific technical details about the movement that confirmed it was definitely the one my grandfather made. When I confronted my sister, she shrugged and said, "It was just collecting dust in your drawer. At least someone's appreciating it now." I reminded her that the watch was supposed to stay in our family and represented grandfather's legacy. She replied, "Well, it's done now. Maybe you should have spoken up sooner." I contacted the buyer and explained the situation, but he refused to return it, saying he paid good money and it was a legitimate sale. He suggested I work things out with family and not involve him in our disagreements. I then attempted to negotiate with my sister to at least split the money she received, but she claimed she needed it all for a down payment on an apartment with her boyfriend. When I pressed her about the family significance of the watch, she scoffed and said, "Oh, please, it's just a thing. Grandfather is gone, and he doesn't care what happens to his stuff anymore." After getting nowhere, I consulted a lawyer who believes I have a strong case based on documented family understanding of my grandfather's wishes. Several family members witnessed him stating his intentions for the watch multiple times over the years. I've now filed a lawsuit against both my sister and the buyer. My sister is telling everyone I'm an idiot who's trying to ruin her life over just a watch. She's posted on social media claiming I'm obsessed with material possessions and trying to block her future happiness. My parents are split. Dad thinks I'm right to fight for my inheritance, while Mom thinks I should let it go to preserve family harmony. She keeps saying, "Your grandfather wouldn't want to see the family torn apart like this." Several cousins and my aunt have messaged to say they remember grandfather's wishes clearly and will testify if needed. I'd rather take this to court than accepting it's gone. Additional information for those asking why I didn't push harder initially. I was dealing with my own grief and didn't want to create more tension in the family. I genuinely thought my sister would treat the watch with respect, even if she somehow convinced herself it should be hers. Finding out she sold it feels like she's erased part of our family history and grandfather's legacy for quick cash. The watch isn't just about monetary value. It represents the culmination of my grandfather's career and was meant to stay in our family for generations. My grandfather spent 3 years designing and crafting that watch, often working late into the night perfecting every component. He considered it his masterpiece. Update 1, February 20th, 2025. Thanks to everyone who commented on my original post. The situation has developed in ways I didn't expect, so I wanted to provide an update. After filing the lawsuit, I uncovered more details about what happened. My sister didn't just take the watch. She convinced our uncle, who was helping organize grandfather's belongings, that grandfather had changed his wishes. Uncle Mark revealed this when I contacted him about possibly testifying. He apologized profusely, explaining my sister had told him grandfather pulled her aside during his final hospital stay and expressed concerns that I wouldn't appreciate the artistry of the watch and was only interested in the mechanical aspects. She apparently told Uncle Mark that grandfather worried I would dismantle the watch to study its mechanism or store it away rather than display and appreciate it properly. Uncle Mark, who doesn't know much about watches himself, found this convincing enough to override years of hearing grandfather's actual wishes. This conversation supposedly happened when I was getting coffee in the hospital cafeteria. No one else witnessed it. Uncle Mark handed over the watch without questioning further because he wanted to respect what he thought were grandfather's final wishes. When I asked him why he never mentioned this to me, he admitted he thought it might hurt my feelings and assumed my sister would at least keep the watch in the family. I've gathered statements from 3 other family members who clearly recall grandfather's original intention for the watch to go to the grandson who pursued engineering. My cousin, who visited grandfather frequently in his final months, confirmed grandfather mentioned the watch going to me just 2 weeks before he passed. He even recalled grandfather showing him a small notebook where he documented the watch's creation process, saying he was saving it for me to study after he was gone. That notebook was also missing from his belongings after my sister went through them. The lawsuit is proceeding, though it's costing more than I anticipated. I've already spent $3,800 on legal fees, and my lawyer expects the total could reach $12,000 if this goes to trial. The watch is appraised at approximately $45,000 due to its unique design and my grandfather's minor fame in watchmaking circles. Some collectors have suggested it could be worth even more given its provenance and the documented creation process. My sister has escalated her campaign against me. She posted photos of the watch on social media with a caption, "Remember that family heirloom my brother's suing over? Looks much better on its new owner than collecting dust in some engineer's drawer." Her boyfriend commented, "Some people just can't stand seeing others happy." One of her friends suggested I was jealous of her relationship and trying to sabotage her future. I've blocked most of these people to avoid seeing their comments, but mutual family members keep sending me screenshots. When confronted at a family dinner last week, my sister stormed out after shouting that I've always been jealous of her relationship and I'm trying to sabotage her down payment plans out of spite. She claimed I never really cared about the watch until I found out she sold it, which is completely untrue. I asked about it multiple times after grandfather passed. Our mother followed her out while Dad and I sat in uncomfortable silence for 20 minutes before he suggested we get dessert. Later that evening, Dad told me he supports my position but wishes there was a way to resolve this without courts. He revealed my sister has struggled financially for the past year after losing her job during company downsizing, but she's been too proud to tell the family. This doesn't excuse selling the watch, but it adds context to her desperation for funds. My first court date is set for March 17th. I'll update again after that. Despite the cost and family tension, I remain committed to recovering my grandfather's legacy. If the watch can't be returned, I at least want recognition that it was wrongfully taken and sold, plus some form of compensation that acknowledges its true value, both monetary and sentimental. Additional info regarding questions about why I'm throwing away money on legal fees. This isn't about the money. The watch represents my connection to my grandfather and the traditions he wanted to establish in our family. If I back down now, I'm potentially agreeing that family wishes mean nothing when someone decides to cash in for personal gain. The amount I'm spending might seem disproportionate to those focused solely on financial calculations, but some things are worth fighting for regardless of cost. Update 2, March 22, 2025. Court proceedings have begun, and things have gotten messier than I anticipated. The first hearing was on March 17th, and though no final decision was reached, several important developments occurred. My uncle testified about how my sister convinced him to give her the watch, admitting he now believes he was manipulated. He brought emails from shortly after grandfather's death where I specifically asked about the watch, contradicting my sister's claim that I never showed interest in it. 2 of my cousins and my grandfather's former apprentice all testified about hearing grandfather explicitly state his intentions for the watch multiple times over the years. The apprentice, now a successful watchmaker himself, explained the technical significance of the piece and why grandfather would have wanted it to go to someone who understood its mechanical innovations. The buyer, my sister's boyfriend's father, showed up with an attorney who argued that he purchased the item in good faith and shouldn't be punished for family disagreements he wasn't privy to. His lawyer presented screenshots of text messages between my sister and the buyer discussing the sale, which revealed something incredibly frustrating. My sister told him about the family history of the watch and grandfather's wishes regarding me, but claimed I didn't want it anymore because I had moved on to digital watches. This is completely false. I wear mechanical watches exclusively out of respect for my grandfather's craft, including one he repaired for me when I was in college. The buyer's attorney argued that even if my sister obtained the watch improperly, his client was an innocent third party who had no reason to question her right to sell it. My lawyer countered that the texts show he was aware of potential complications with the sale but proceeded anyway. The judge seemed concerned about this point and requested additional documentation about what the buyer knew and when. My sister's testimony was full of inconsistencies. She first claimed grandfather changed his mind on his deathbed, then later said he had expressed doubts about me receiving the watch for years. When pressed for specific instances or witnesses to these conversations, she couldn't provide any beyond private conversations. She became defensive when questioned about the notebook documenting the watch's creation, first denying knowledge of it, then suggesting it might have been thrown out during house cleaning, then finally admitting she might have misplaced it during her review of grandfather's belongings. The most shocking moment came when the financial details emerged. The buyer didn't pay $45,000 as the watch is worth. He paid $17,500. Which means my sister sold a family heirloom for less than 40% of its appraised value. When this came to light, my sister broke down and admitted she needed the money quickly for a deposit on an apartment she and her boyfriend wanted before someone else bought it. She claimed she researched watch values online but was confused by different pricing models and thought she was getting a fair deal. The buyer testified that he knew the watch was worth more but considered $17,500 fair because my sister approached him urgently needing cash. He admitted he would have paid more if pushed but didn't volunteer this information to her. When asked if he considered the ethical implications of buying a family heirloom at a steep discount from someone clearly in financial distress, he replied that business is business and people make their own decisions. Legal fees have now reached $7,200. My savings account is taking a serious hit, but the judge seems sympathetic to my case, particularly after the text messages revealed my sister had misrepresented the situation to the buyer. My lawyer believes this strengthens our position considerably. Outside the courtroom, my mother finally broke her silence. Instead of supporting either side, she berated both of us for destroying the family over material possessions. She then revealed she's been having health issues that she's kept secret because everyone's too busy fighting over a damn watch to notice. She's been going to doctor's appointments alone. This bombshell left everyone stunned, and my father immediately left with her without speaking to either me or my sister. I tried calling both parents later that evening but got no answer. My cousin later informed me that Mom has been experiencing concerning symptoms for months and finally got tests that revealed abnormalities requiring further investigation. She's scheduled for additional procedures next week. The fact that she kept this from everyone while we've been focused on the lawsuit has made me question my priorities. Though I still believe in the principle behind my case, the next court date is set for April 8th. The judge has encouraged us to reach a settlement before then, suggesting the most equitable solution might be for the buyer to return the watch in exchange for a refund for my sister. Since my sister has already spent most of the money, this creates yet another complication. My lawyer suggested I might need to provide the refund myself to facilitate the watch's return, then pursue reimbursement from my sister over time, essentially buying back what should have been mine in the first place. I came into this wanting justice, but now everything feels tangled in a bigger mess than I ever anticipated. Still, I can't bring myself to back down when we're this far into the process. Additional info to address comments suggesting I should prioritize my mother's health over the lawsuit. Of course, her health is more important. I've reached out to both my parents since the revelation, offering to drive my mother to appointments and help however I can. Dad has responded with brief texts saying they need space. This situation isn't as simple as choosing between family health and a possession. Both are happening simultaneously, and dropping the lawsuit now wouldn't magically fix the other issues that have surfaced. In fact, without a formal resolution, the watch situation would likely continue causing tension indefinitely. Update 3, April 12, 2025. The court case has taken unexpected turns, so I wanted to provide another update. The scheduled April 8th hearing happened, but with developments no one saw coming. 3 days before the hearing, my sister's boyfriend's father, the watch buyer, reached out through his lawyer proposing a settlement. He offered to return the watch if my sister refunded his money. Since she spent most of it, he suggested a payment plan where she'd pay back $500 monthly until the debt was cleared. He also requested a formal acknowledgement that he wasn't aware of the disputed ownership when he purchased it. Apparently, he's concerned about his reputation in collector circles. This seemed like a reasonable solution, so my lawyer and I agreed to the terms, pending my sister's approval. On the morning of the hearing, my sister didn't show up. Her lawyer arrived looking flustered, explaining he couldn't reach her and had been trying her phone since the previous evening. The judge was clearly annoyed and gave her a 48-hour window to appear before considering a default judgment. Her lawyer admitted off the record that he hadn't been fully paid for his services and seemed reluctant to continue representing her interests without communication. Later that evening, I received a call from my sister's boyfriend. He explained that my sister had packed some belongings and left their apartment 3 days ago after a major argument about the watch situation. Apparently, he had suggested she should accept the settlement offer, which led to a heated exchange about loyalty and support. He hadn't heard from her since, except for a text saying she needed space to figure things out. He sounded genuinely concerned and even apologized for his father's role in the mess, admitting he had initially encouraged the purchase because it seemed like a good business opportunity. My parents got involved at this point, filing a missing person report after confirming none of her friends had seen her for 2 days. The lawsuit became secondary to finding my sister. Dad organized family members to check locations she frequented while Mom stayed home in case she called. The strain of the situation clearly worsened Mom's health, and I noticed her hands shaking when I stopped by to check on them yesterday morning. My aunt called to say my sister had shown up at her house in a neighboring state. She'd apparently been staying at a motel, trying to clear her head. According to my aunt, my sister spent most of the first day crying and revealed she felt trapped between impossible choices. My aunt convinced her to call our parents, who drove 4 hours to bring her home. They arrived back late last night, and Dad texted saying they all needed to rest before discussing anything further. Today, my sister finally contacted me directly. The conversation wasn't what I expected. She admitted to lying about grandfather changing his wishes and confessed she sold the watch because she and her boyfriend were in financial trouble after making some poor investment decisions involving cryptocurrency. They had lost nearly $30,000 of their savings on what turned out to be a scam and were too embarrassed to admit this to anyone. She said she'd agree to the settlement offer and would work extra shifts at her job to make the repayments. What struck me most was her explanation for running away. She said she couldn't face everyone after her lies were exposed in court, and she felt trapped between her boyfriend's pressure to fight the case and her own growing realization that she'd made a terrible mistake. She also admitted that seeing Mom's health deteriorate because of the family conflict made her feel overwhelmed with guilt. She spent those days away considering whether to leave town permanently or try to make amends. I told her I was relieved she was safe, and that while I was still hurt by her actions, I was open to finding a path forward. We agreed to meet with our lawyers tomorrow to formalize the settlement agreement. She also mentioned she believes she still has grandfather's notebook about the watch somewhere in storage and promised to search for it this weekend. The judge has approved our settlement agreement. The watch buyer will return the heirloom to me next week, and my sister will begin monthly payments to him. I've agreed to drop all other claims, including legal fees. While this means I'm covering the significant costs myself, ending the legal battle feels worth it at this point. As for my mother, I've learned she has non-cancerous but concerning growths that require monitoring. Dad assured me her health situation isn't directly life-threatening but needs attention. The stress of family conflict definitely hasn't helped her condition. I've apologized to both of them for not being more aware of what was happening and have committed to helping with her care going forward. Additional info to those asking if I feel victorious. This doesn't feel like a victory. Getting the watch back matters to me, but the cost has been far higher than just legal fees. I'm realizing that my sister's actions came from a place of financial desperation she was too proud to admit. And while that doesn't excuse what she did, it helps me understand it better. We've all made mistakes throughout this process, and now we have to decide whether family relationships are worth rebuilding. I believe they are. Update 4, May 30th, 2025. It's been more than a month since my last update, and I wanted to share how things have progressed since the settlement. The watch was returned to me as agreed. The handover happened at my lawyer's office with both my sister and the buyer present. When I finally held it again, I noticed several small scratches on the case that weren't there before, and the crown had a slight wobble that suggested improper handling. The buyer explained that he had taken it to a jeweler for cleaning and apparently the person wasn't experienced with antique timepieces. He seemed genuinely apologetic about the damage. I took it to a specialist watchmaker who was able to restore it to its original condition, though at a cost of $850. My sister has made 2 payments to the buyer so far. She's taken a second job working weekends at a local cafe to meet her financial obligations. The arrangement seems to be working, though she mentioned it will take nearly 3 years to complete the payments at the current rate. Her boyfriend initially moved out after their fight but returned 2 weeks later. According to my father, they're still together but have postponed any talk of engagement or apartments. They've moved into a smaller rental to reduce expenses and are gradually rebuilding their savings. My sister also found and returned grandfather's notebook documenting the watch's creation. It was mixed in with old college textbooks in her storage unit. The notebook contains detailed sketches, technical specifications, and journal entries spanning the 3 years he worked on the piece. We've had 3 family counseling sessions. Progress has been slow and awkward. During the first session, we mostly established ground rules for communication. By the second session, my sister revealed she's harbored resentment toward me since childhood because she felt our grandfather favored me due to my interest in engineering. She admitted that taking the watch was partly motivated by a desire to finally be the important one in the family narrative. She described feeling invisible next to my achievements and the special bond one shared with grandfather. This revelation hit me hard. I had never considered how my relationship with our grandfather might have appeared from her perspective. While it doesn't justify selling a family heirloom, it provided context I hadn't previously understood. In the third session, I acknowledged that I probably talked too much about my projects with grandfather without recognizing how that might have made her feel excluded. We've begun discussing ways to honor different types of family connections rather than comparing them. My mother's health has stabilized. The medication the doctor prescribed seems to be working, and her recent tests showed improvement. She started joining my father and me for lunch every Sunday, slowly rebuilding our regular family routines. Additional info for those asking about legal costs. In the end, the final tally came to just over $9,000. It was a significant financial burden, but I don't regret fighting for what was right. Now on to the next story. Story 3. I received a full-ride academic scholarship to my state university last year. The scholarship covers tuition, books, and housing, plus it provides a stipend for living expenses. My maternal grandfather was a professor at this university for 40 years, and he established the scholarship fund before he passed away when I was 15. My parents separated when I was 14 and divorced when I was 15, shortly after my grandfather passed away. Their relationship had always been strained. My father worked in construction and often took jobs that required him to be away from home for weeks at a time. My mother worked as a receptionist at a doctor's office but was laid off when I was 11, and she never found another job after that. Every time my father came home, they would argue about money. My mother would complain that we barely had enough to cover our bills. My father would respond by saying he was working 60-hour weeks just to keep a roof over our heads. I would go to my room and put on headphones whenever they started raising their voices. During my freshman year of high school, I began staying late at school for study groups and club meetings, which meant I wouldn't get home until after dinner time. My mother would sometimes leave a plate of food in the microwave for me. Sometimes there would be nothing. In the months before they separated, their arguments became more frequent. One night, I came home to find my father throwing clothes into a duffel bag. He walked past me without saying anything and didn't return for a week. When he came back, it was to get more of his things. He had found an apartment across town. The divorce proceedings lasted for months. My father's construction work had started to fail, and my mother had no income of her own. They fought over the house, the car, and the small amount of savings they had managed to accumulate. Neither of them seemed to fight over me during this time. I spent most weekends with my grandmother, my father's mother, who lived about 20 minutes away. She would pick me up on Friday afternoons and drop me off on Sunday evenings. Sometimes I would find my mother sitting in the same spot on the couch when I returned as when I had left 2 days earlier. Other times she wouldn't be home at all. After the divorce was finalized, my mother kept the house but had to get a job to pay the mortgage. She found work as a cashier at a grocery store. The hours were long and the pay wasn't great, but it was something. My father was ordered to pay child support, but his work continued to struggle, and the payments were often late or missing entirely. My grandmother suggested that I come live with her, but my mother refused. She said I needed to stay with her because it looked better if her son lived with her. So I continued to live in my childhood home, though I spent as much time as possible at school or at my grandmother's house on weekends. By the time I was 17, my father's construction work had recovered somewhat, and he was more consistent with child support payments. My mother had been promoted to assistant manager at the grocery store and seemed less stressed about money. They began speaking to each other again when my father would drop off the child support checks instead of mailing them. Last year, I graduated from high school and received the news that I had qualified for my grandfather's scholarship. It would cover all my university expenses for 4 years as long as I maintained a 3.5 GPA. There would also be a small living stipend paid out each month. I wouldn't have to work during the school year and could focus entirely on my studies. I was planning to major in engineering, the same field my grandfather had taught. The weekend after my high school graduation, my parents invited me to dinner. I assumed it was to celebrate my graduation and scholarship. When I arrived at the restaurant, they were sitting together at a table, holding hands. They announced that they had been dating again for the past 6 months and had decided to renew their vows. The ceremony would take place during the winter break of my freshman year of college. I congratulated them and asked about their plans. That's when they mentioned that they wanted me to contribute to the cost of the ceremony and reception. Specifically, They wanted me to use part of my scholarship stipend to help pay for their vow renewal. They explained that since my education was already covered, I didn't really need the living stipend. They had already picked out a venue and caterer, and the total cost would be around $15,000. They wanted me to contribute $5,000 from my stipend over the next semester. I told them that the stipend was meant for my living expenses while at university. My father responded by saying that I would be living in the dorms with a meal plan, so my expenses would be minimal. My mother added that they had supported me for 18 years, and this was my chance to give something back to them. I pointed out that the scholarship was established by my grandfather specifically for my education, and using it for anything else would be disrespecting his wishes. My father waved his hand dismissively and said my grandfather wouldn't mind if a small portion went toward a family celebration. When I continued to refuse, my mother's eyes narrowed. She said I had become selfish since receiving the scholarship and that I thought I was better than them now that I was going to college. My father added that they had sacrificed everything for me, and now I couldn't even help them celebrate their reunion. I left the restaurant and walked the 2 miles back to my grandmother's house, where I had been staying since graduation. When I told her what had happened, she shook her head but didn't seem surprised. She told me I was welcome to stay with her until it was time to move into the university dorms. The next day, both my parents called and texted multiple times, but I didn't respond. My mother left a voicemail saying I was being childish and that we needed to discuss this as adults. My father sent a text saying I owed them this much after all they had done for me. A week later, my maternal uncle invited the entire family to a barbecue at his house. I didn't want to go, knowing my parents would be there, but my grandmother convinced me it would be better to face them in a public setting rather than avoid them completely. At the barbecue, everything seemed normal at first. My uncle was grilling burgers, my cousins were playing volleyball in the yard, and my mother was chatting with her sister. My father was helping my uncle with the grill. I stayed close to my grandmother and made small talk with my cousins. During dinner, as everyone was seated around the large picnic tables in my uncle's backyard, my mother cleared her throat and announced that she and my father had set a date for their vow renewal ceremony. Everyone clapped and offered congratulations. Then she added, with a pointed look in my direction, that they were having trouble with the budget because someone who had recently come into money refused to help his own parents celebrate their love. The table fell silent. My grandmother put her hand on my arm, but I moved it away and stood up. I told everyone that my mother was referring to my scholarship money, which was intended for my education and living expenses while at university. My father interrupted, saying it wasn't the whole scholarship, just a portion of the stipend that I didn't really need. My uncle, who had always been close to my grandfather, asked if they were talking about the scholarship fund that his father had established. When my mother confirmed this, my uncle's face turned red. He told them it was inappropriate to ask me to use that money for anything other than what my grandfather had intended. My mother argued that family should help family, and since my education was covered, I should be willing to share my good fortune. My father added that they weren't asking for much, just a small contribution to their special day. My grandmother spoke up then, reminding them that they had barely acknowledged my existence during their divorce and the years following. She pointed out that neither of them had contributed a penny to my college fund, while my grandfather had worked hard to establish the scholarship specifically for his grandchildren's education. The argument escalated, with my parents accusing my grandmother and uncle of turning me against them. Other family members began taking sides. Eventually, my parents stormed out of the barbecue, with my mother shouting that I was ungrateful and would regret this decision. The following week, I received a message from my father stating that if I didn't reconsider my decision, I shouldn't bother coming to the vow renewal ceremony. He added that they had been planning to offer me my old room during summer breaks from college, but now I would need to make other arrangements. I replied that I would be staying with my grandmother during breaks and wished them well with their ceremony. I also reiterated that my decision regarding the scholarship money was final. 2 days later, I received a long text message from my mother. She wrote that she had given up her youth and career ambitions to raise me, while my father had worked himself to exhaustion to provide for us. The least I could do was help make their special day perfect. She concluded by saying that my grandfather would be ashamed of my selfishness. I didn't respond to her message. Instead, I focused on preparing for my move to university. My grandmother helped me shop for dorm supplies and promised to drive me to campus on moving day. The night before I was set to leave for university, my parents showed up at my grandmother's house unannounced. My father demanded to speak with me alone, but my grandmother refused to leave the room. My mother began crying, saying they just wanted one perfect day to make up for all the mistakes they had made in the past. My father added that $5,000 wasn't much compared to the total value of the scholarship, which would cover over $80,000 in tuition and expenses over 4 years. I told them once again that the scholarship was meant for my education, and I wouldn't disrespect my grandfather's memory by using it for something else. My father called me stubborn and selfish, just like my grandfather had been. My mother said I clearly didn't care about their happiness. When I still wouldn't budge, they left, with my father slamming the door behind them. The next day, my grandmother drove me to university. As we unpacked my things in my dorm room, she assured me that I had made the right decision. She said my grandfather would be proud of me for standing my ground and respecting his wishes for the scholarship. During my first semester, I received occasional texts from my mother, mostly sharing news about the vow renewal plans. She never mentioned the scholarship money again directly, but would sometimes make comments about how they had to downsize their plans due to unexpected budget constraints. I kept my responses brief and avoided engaging with these comments. My father rarely contacted me at all, except to ask when I would be coming home for Thanksgiving. When I told him I would be spending the holiday with my grandmother, he replied with a single word, "Typical." So, am I the jerk for refusing to use my scholarship money to pay for my parents' vow renewal? Update 1. It's been about 5 months since my last post. I just finished my first semester at university and made the dean's list with a 3.8 GPA. My engineering courses were challenging but interesting, and I've joined a robotics club that competes in regional tournaments. My parents went ahead with their vow renewal ceremony last month, though on a smaller scale than they had originally planned. I know this because they posted dozens of photos on social media. They rented a small event space at a local hotel instead of the country club venue they had initially wanted. The catering appeared to be a buffet rather than the plated dinner service they had described to me. About 30 people attended, mostly colleagues from my mother's grocery store and a few of my father's construction buddies. None of my grandparents were there, nor were any of my aunts or uncles from either side of the family. My grandmother showed me the photos when I came to stay with her for winter break. She mentioned that my mother had sent her an invitation at the last minute, but she decided not to attend out of respect for me. I assured her that I wouldn't have minded if she had gone, but she insisted that it was her choice. 3 days into my winter break, my parents showed up at my grandmother's house again. They brought a small Christmas gift for me, a watch that looked expensive. When I opened it, my father pointed out that it was the same brand as the one my grandfather used to wear. My mother added that they had saved up for months to afford it, even with the extra expenses of the vow renewal ceremony. They stayed for about an hour, making awkward small talk about my classes and their jobs. As they were leaving, my mother hugged me and whispered that they had put down a deposit on a rental property as an investment, but were having trouble making the first mortgage payment. She hinted that any help I could provide would be just a loan, until the property started generating rental income. I stepped back and told them directly that I would not be providing them with money from my scholarship stipend. My father's face turned red, and he started to say something, but my mother put her hand on his arm and shook her head. They left without another word. Later that evening, my grandmother informed me that she had received several calls from my parents over the past few weeks. They had asked her to convince me to share some of my scholarship money with them. She had refused each time, telling them that the scholarship was for my education only. She apologized for not telling me sooner, but she hadn't wanted to ruin my winter break. I returned to university for my second semester with a sense of relief. The distance from my parents made it easier to focus on my studies. I picked up a part-time job working 10 hours a week for some extra spending money that wasn't connected to my scholarship stipend. My mother continued to send occasional texts, usually photos of her and my father doing ordinary things like dining out or watching TV together. She never mentioned money directly but would sometimes include comments about how they were making sacrifices or cutting back to make ends meet. I responded politely but briefly to these messages. My father rarely contacted me at all, except for a terse "happy birthday" text on my 19th birthday in February. When I thanked him, he didn't respond. Update 2. It's been 6 months since my last update. I completed my freshman year with a 3.85 GPA and secured an engineering internship for the summer at a firm in the same city as my university. The internship is paid, so I've been able to save some money beyond my scholarship stipend. I decided not to return to my hometown for the summer. Instead, I'm renting a small apartment near campus with a classmate who also has a summer internship in the area. My grandmother was understanding and has visited me twice already. My parents' behavior has taken a strange turn. After months of barely communicating with me, they suddenly began calling and texting regularly. When they learned I wouldn't be coming home for the summer, my mother claimed they had been planning a family vacation to make up for all the tension over the past year. My father mentioned they had been fixing up my old room, expecting me to stay there. When I explained that I had already signed a lease and committed to the internship, my father accused me of deliberately avoiding them. My mother suggested I was being influenced by my grandmother, who had always disliked her. I reminded them that they had previously told me I wasn't welcome in their home unless I contributed financially. They both denied ever saying this. Last month, they showed up unannounced at my apartment. They somehow convinced a good friend of mine to give them my address. My roommate let them in before I returned from my internship. When I arrived, they were sitting in our living room looking through my textbooks. My mother had brought a home-cooked meal in plastic containers, and my father was examining our apartment, commenting on things that needed repair. They stayed for 3 hours. During that time, they mentioned multiple times how expensive their new rental property was turning out to be. The tenants had damaged some appliances, and they had to replace the water heater. My father pulled out his phone and showed me photos of the property, pointing out all the work he had done himself to save money. My mother added that they had maxed out 2 credit cards to cover the repairs. Before leaving, my mother hugged me tightly and slipped a piece of paper into my hand. It was a bank account number with a note saying, "Anything you can spare would help." I returned the paper to her and told her again that my scholarship money was for my education only. My father shook his head and muttered something about me becoming just like those academic types who don't understand the real world. After they left, my roommate asked if my parents always acted that way. When I asked what he meant, he said they had spent the entire time waiting for me talking about their financial problems and asking if he knew how much my scholarship stipend was. 2 weeks later, I received an email from the University Financial Aid Office. Someone had called them inquiring about the payment schedule for my scholarship stipend, claiming to be me. When the office asked verification questions, the caller couldn't provide the correct answers and hung up. The financial aid officer wanted to confirm that I hadn't made this call and to remind me never to share my student ID or financial information with anyone. I immediately suspected my parents and called my grandmother to ask if she had heard from them recently. She told me they had visited her the previous weekend, asking detailed questions about my grandfather's scholarship fund and whether there were any provisions for family emergencies that would allow me to access more money. She had shown them the door and called me as soon as they left, but I had been busy and missed her call. After consulting with my grandmother, I decided to meet with the financial aid office in person. I explained the situation and asked what protections were in place for my scholarship fund. The counselor assured me that all disbursements went directly to my student account for tuition and housing, with only the living stipend being deposited into my personal bank account. They added extra security questions to my account and noted that no changes should be made without my appearing in person with ID. I also went to my bank and opened a new account at a different institution, transferring my savings and arranging for my stipend and internship payments to be deposited there. I did not share this information with my parents. 2 days later, my mother called sounding frantic. She claimed my father had been injured at work and needed surgery that their insurance wouldn't fully cover. They needed $7,000 and had nowhere else to turn. When I expressed sympathy but again refused to provide money from my scholarship, She broke down and admitted they had called the financial aid office pretending to be me. She justified it by saying they were desperate and knew I wouldn't help willingly. She insisted they would pay back every penny once the rental property started turning a profit. I told her what they had done was fraud and could have jeopardized my entire scholarship. I also informed her that I had already taken steps to secure my accounts and that any further attempts to access my scholarship money would force me to take legal action. She began sobbing and handed the phone to my father, who berated me for threatening my own parents and lacking any sense of family loyalty. After that call, I blocked their numbers and email addresses. I spoke with a counselor at the University Student Services office who helped me create a plan for moving forward without contact with my parents. I'm continuing my internship and focusing on my studies. My grandmother checks in regularly and even spoke with my grandfather's old colleagues to ensure that my scholarship status is secure regardless of my parents' actions. Now on to the next story. Story 4. My mother-in-law faked my husband's fertility test to make him think that I cheated after I got pregnant, then kicked me out. He wanted me back when he found the truth, but I filed for divorce. My husband, Clark, and I, both 27, are currently in the process of getting a divorce. I just found out most of it is happening because his mother had been poisoning him against me. He and I started dating 4 years ago, got married 2 years back, and for the past year or so we've been trying for a baby. Unfortunately, we haven't been very lucky there. In spite of our consistency, I haven't been able to get pregnant yet, and it has taken its toll on our marriage. Neither of us wanted to entertain the idea that maybe one of us was infertile, so we just kept trying and didn't discuss the pregnancy thing too much. But the frustration took form in other fights, so we would get into a lot of petty and irrelevant fights about small stuff. Recently, things were pretty strained between the two of us, but then about a month ago, I found out that I was finally pregnant after a really long time of trying. First, both of us were really happy. We threw a party to announce it to everybody and stuff, and things were going well. But for some reason, after the party, he started acting very weird and differently. I couldn't put my finger on it, but all of a sudden, he had started shutting me out and becoming very distant. No matter how hard I tried, he just wouldn't tell me what his problem was. Then one day, I told him that it wouldn't work if he just kept pushing me away while I was pregnant, and I said I'd rather just go and stay with my mom if he was going to keep acting like this. That set him off. He started yelling at me like crazy. He told me that he would rather have me sent away as well because he didn't even want to see my face anymore since it only annoyed him, and he kept saying that I was just like my mom, that he should have known. When I asked him what on earth it was supposed to mean, he told me that he knew that it wasn't he who managed to get me pregnant. It must have been somebody else because he, as far as he knows, is infertile. He got himself tested a couple of weeks after finding out that we were pregnant because it seemed a little too sudden. So now he couldn't bring himself to trust me and asked me to get out. I tried to reason with him because, of course, I know that I haven't cheated on him, but he was too upset to hear me out and I couldn't deal with this crap anymore. So I just packed my stuff as quickly as I could and got out of there. I had finally snapped, and that day, I knew that I couldn't go back to this guy since he literally told me I could only come back after a paternity test, or else I could just stay away. So I spoke to my mom. I've been staying with her, and I've also spoken to a lawyer and filed for a divorce. But now, all of a sudden, he wants to stop the divorce proceedings. Basically, he just found out that the results from the fertility test that he had received had been falsified thanks to his mom. I'm not surprised that she did something like that. She's always had it in for me right from the first day. She and my mom used to know each other since they had a couple of common friends, and she did not like my mom when she was younger. She used to be a bit of a party animal, and according to my mother-in-law, that meant that my mom was a woman of loose character who used to get around without ever committing to anyone, and had implied that even now she's probably gone back to her old ways because she's been single ever since my father passed away a couple of years ago. I'm not making this up. These are things that she has actually said to me. Since then, I haven't spoken to my mother-in-law. This happened shortly after my wedding. I guess my mother-in-law and I got into an argument about something, and she just said all these horrible things about my mom. So I told my husband that he could keep in touch with her if he wanted to, but I wasn't going to. Clark did scold his mom a little for being so nasty about it, but eventually he did keep in touch with her, and I should have left him then and there because it's very clear that he did not respect me or my family even back then. If he had, His mom wouldn't have been able to influence him so easily because apparently, from whatever I've been told, she is the one who planted the idea into his head that I might have cheated on him because at the end of the day, I still am my mother's daughter. So that's why he felt the need to get a fertility test after telling his mom that I was pregnant, and unfortunately, his mom was able to convince him to get himself tested at her brother's clinic. Clark got duped by his own mother and uncle because they ended up falsifying the results just to start trouble between the two of us, and he fell for it. A couple of days ago, he saw some conversations between his mom and his uncle on her phone, and that's how he found out the truth. Now he's cut his mother off and he's begging me to come back, but there's no way that's happening. 2 weeks have already passed since I was kicked out, and I just can't imagine going back to him after everything that happened because it has become very clear to me that he doesn't trust me, and I don't think I can stay in a marriage with no trust at all. The fact of the matter is, regardless of whatever his mother told him, he doubted me and thought I was cheating on him, and I've been feeling terrible about it, so I don't want to go back. I've spoken to my friends about this, and while they do agree that it was really stupid of him, I need to think about things from his perspective as well because at the end of the day, he did receive those test results, and anybody in their right mind would obviously instantly believe it, and he might have been struggling with what to do with that information as well because it's not like he found out and then he immediately kicked me out. It took him a couple of weeks, and he only got triggered when I mentioned my mom, so they think it must not have been an easy decision for him either, and I need to give him the benefit of the doubt at least for a little while. Besides, it's pretty clear that my mother-in-law had been poisoning him against me and my mom for years, so that was bound to have some effect no matter what. I can't change my mom's past. She was who she was, and it's not like I'm embarrassed or ashamed of her. But the factor remains that most people wouldn't look too kindly upon that lifestyle because it was true that she was with a different guy every weekend when she was younger. I'm not saying it to shame her. It's just how it was, and she herself has admitted it. Of course, that doesn't give Clark and his mom the right to shame her for it either, but they are entitled to their own opinions. I just think it's weird to paint me in the same light even though he's known me for years now. Anyway, I'm just confused because at the end of the day he did receive those test results, and I guess if I was in his place I would feel kind of iffy about it as well, but I still don't think I want to give him a second chance at this point. So I don't know if I want to get a divorce from my husband. Edit. I didn't mention it because it is not exactly relevant in my situation, but yes, Clark is suing his uncle and his clinic. What they did was a serious violation, and they're going to get into a lot of trouble for that since he has proof. He has all those screenshots that he found on his mom's phone, and I'm hoping that he makes them pay for it. The two of them teamed up and ruined our marriage. They totally deserve whatever is coming. I find it shocking that his uncle risked so much to help his mom ruin our marriage because I didn't think anybody from his family apart from his mom would be able to hate me so much. But I guess that's not how it is. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since my last update. I told Clark that I'm not coming back, and while I'm really sorry that he was fooled by his own mother and uncle, I can't help it because at the end of the day, it's true that he doubted me even though I had never given him a reason to do that. He hadn't been fully transparent in our relationship either because he hadn't told me a thing about the fertility test, and even back when he was fighting with me and accusing me of being just like my mom, I had tried to tell him that he could just get tested again because it must have been a mistake or maybe he wasn't actually infertile anymore because I was sure that the baby had to be his. I was sure on his behalf, but he didn't trust me enough and actually kicked me out when I was pregnant. On top of that, the things he had said about my mom were very disrespectful, and I was not going to tolerate that. My parents, regardless of how they used to be in the past before I was born, put an end to all their craziness and wild lifestyle for my sake and brought me up in the best way possible. My mom, she might have had her share of fun when she was younger, and maybe she didn't like the idea of commitment back then, but that was her choice, and I refuse to be ashamed of her for that. At the same time, neither do I like the implication that I'm the same way, especially given the fact that I've been married to him for 2 years, and I was the one who said that I wanted to start trying for a baby. If that's not a commitment, I don't know what is. Anyway, the bottom line was that he had no respect for my family, and he had no respect for me either, so I was not going to entertain the idea of going back to him. Now he could just sit and regret whatever he had done. It was not going to change anything. After sending him that text, I blocked him so he wouldn't be able to get back to me. For a couple of days, nothing happened, so I thought that maybe he had accepted his fate. But then, about 5 days after that message, he sent me a text from a different number saying that he really wanted to meet me and talk to me because he knew that we could work it out, and he did not want to give up on our marriage so easily, especially right now when I was about to become a mother. Ordinarily, I wouldn't have replied to that message, but the way he phrased it was very hypocritical, and I didn't like that because I was about to become a mother even when he had kicked me out back then. It hadn't occurred to him because he was too busy thinking about himself and whatever nonsense his mom had been feeding him, and now just because it's convenient for him, he thinks that he can ask me to come back and I'm going to follow. So I just replied to him saying that it was very hypocritical of him to bring these things up, especially when he didn't care about any of it just a couple of weeks ago. I was about to block him again, but before I could do that, he replied to me saying that he knew that he had messed up, but he was also going through a lot right now because he had just realized that his own family had ruined his marriage and I needed to cut him some slack. I couldn't believe that even after everything that had happened, he was still so ready to believe that he was the victim in the situation as if he had no free will of his own. So I ended up calling him on the phone number because I really wanted to give him a piece of my mind, and I didn't care if that was going to make the drama worse. I just wanted to vent out my feelings. When he picked up, I immediately put him on blast. I told him that it was not just his family who had ruined his marriage. He also had a huge role to play in that. Without his consent, none of this could have happened, and he can't stay in denial of that. His mom was able to mislead him into believing that I might have cheated on him because in his head he could be misled. If he had trusted me the way I trusted him, he never would have even entertained that idea and would have spoken to me instead of going and getting a fertility test conducted and then kicking me out without even explaining anything to me. That's how healthy marriages work. People talk to each other instead of shutting each other out. So it was really weird of him to blame his family for everything when he himself was equally at fault. He tried to interrupt me and defend himself several times, but I did not let him speak at all. I just told him that it was pathetic that even after all this, he still believed that he was a victim when he was just as bad as the rest of his family. For no reason at all, he had already been suspecting me, and his mom was just able to use that against us. It was his own insecurity and paranoia that ruined our marriage, and he can't run away from that fact. After having said all that, I finally hung up. Now I don't care what happens. I feel a lot better because I was able to get that off my chest. Update 2. Hey, it's been 3 weeks since my last update, and the divorce has been going pretty smoothly, so I haven't had much to say. Ever since that last phone call, Clark and I have had no conversations apart from when we have to interact through our lawyers, but on a one-on-one basis, we've just been steering clear of each other. I know that he has filed a lawsuit against his uncle and his fertility clinic, so with that and plus the divorce, I'm guessing that he pretty much has his hands full. We haven't even spoken about the child custody arrangement yet, but I'm guessing that we can put it off until our baby is finally born. I haven't really decided what I want to do about that because honestly, I would much rather have my baby with me at all times, but my mom thinks that that would be unfair. At the end of the day, regardless of how he was as a husband, he might prove to be a good father, and if there's any chance that our baby can have a good, normal life in spite of the current circumstances, I should take that chance. So I don't know, I might have to share custody with him, but I know for a fact that when the baby is too young, I'm going to be able to spend as much time as I want with him or her. For now, that's my only consolation. My mom has been taking me to all the doctor's appointments, and things have been going smoothly with the pregnancy as well, which I'm really thankful for because I've been quite worried that all the stress was going to take its toll on my body and somehow affect the pregnancy. But I guess my baby and I are made of stronger stuff than I thought, so things are going well for now. Even then, all that said and done, I do find myself feeling quite disappointed occasionally that my baby is not going to have the kind of life that I had. I know that lots of babies are born into divorced families and they turn out completely fine. I don't have anything against the idea, but I don't know, I just hope that maybe my baby would have both parents working as a team, so I do feel bad about the divorce, but it's too late to turn back now. And even if it wasn't, I don't think it would be a good idea because clearly Clark and I don't work well together. I think my baby would rather have 2 good parents who work separately than one bad team screwing everything up. At least that's what I tell myself so that I don't feel too disappointed about what's going on because the guilt is real. I feel like I'm taking away my chance at having my baby's happiness or something. It's weird because I know that I'm technically doing the right thing for all of us, but I don't know, it's not that easy. Update 3. Hi, so in my last update, I had been talking about sharing custody with Clark, and now that we are almost at the end of the 1-month waiting period before our divorce can be finalized, he asked to speak to me in person after our meeting today without our lawyers. I agreed because I knew that this was going to be about the custody arrangement, and once we were seated in the nearby coffee shop, He told me that keeping the divorce and all our disagreements aside, we still had to come to a common ground about how we would raise our child. He said that we could take a breather for a couple of months because we just got done with a divorce and everything, and then we could start discussing the custody arrangement. But before that, he just wanted to speak to me in person so we could see if we were both on the same page or not so as to avoid any complications in the future. I told him what I wanted, that I wanted the baby to spend the most time with me in the initial stages because I felt like at that time, the presence of the mother was most important, and he could keep visiting me whenever he wanted to. I was not going to stop him, and he could spend as much time as he wanted to with the baby. He would only have to leave for the night. I was going to be staying with my mom, so I would have all the help that I needed, and I wasn't too worried about doing everything on my own. He seemed fine with that idea, and then he told me that once the baby was a little older, then we would have to share custody, and maybe the baby could spend half the week with me and the other half with him. We spoke on it some more and decided to stick with this for now and make any changes once the baby is a little older and if this arrangement doesn't seem fit. Then we were able to come to an agreement about the custody. I think we decided that in a couple of months we would speak to our lawyers again, have the paperwork drawn up, and get it all covered legally. The discussion actually went a lot smoother than I expected, and by the end of it, I realized that this was the first time that we had spoken since that last phone call where we fought, and we had managed to be civil with each other. So I realized that maybe co-parenting the baby was not going to be that difficult of a task anyway, and I'm really glad for that because if he was planning on being difficult throughout, I might have had to file for full custody, and I really wouldn't have enjoyed that because I'm sure that he would have fought tooth and nail and it would have been a whole thing. Rather than that, I'm glad that the two of us have decided to put our differences aside for now just for the sake of our baby. In fact, after we got done talking about the custody arrangement, he even told me that he was really sorry that he hadn't been there for me as the father of the baby and that I had to deal with all the medical stuff with just my mother by my side. I told him that it wasn't that big of a deal, but he promised me that from now on, he was going to try and be there for me because that's the least he could do for me and the baby after everything that he had screwed up. He didn't say the words, but I knew that he was sorry about everything that had gone wrong. I guess he was scared of ruining the conversation that we were having, so he didn't bring it up, but he hinted at it, and that was enough for me. At least he has realized his mistake and isn't trying to get defensive anymore, and maybe later on he'll actually apologize, but for now this is good enough. He has also told me how things with his lawsuit against his uncle are going, and I know he's going to win a significant amount of money from that lawsuit, half of which he has already committed to me as child support. For my sake and the baby's sake, I really hope that he wins, and also because it's what should happen. I really can't wait to see his uncle and his mom lose because they totally deserve it. My anger against Clark has pretty much faded away because I think whatever has happened, it's done with now. We just need to focus on the future and make sure that our baby grows up to be happy. But I don't think I'll ever stop hating his mom and his uncle. In fact, I think I might just include it as a clause in the child custody arrangement. I don't want my baby anywhere near that woman and her brother. She doesn't deserve to be the grandma of the child whose life she tried to ruin. That's not going to happen, not on my watch at least. My baby will only have one grandma, and it's going to be my mom, and if Clark has a problem with it, I might just go for full custody anyway. But whatever, that's for me to worry about in the future. Right now, I just want to take a break because I've just come out of a very stressful situation. Update 4. Hi! It's been 2 months since my divorce was finalized, and I'm currently nearing my 3rd trimester, so things are getting pretty heavy. So far, Clark has lived up to whatever he had promised when we went out for coffee and has been pretty diligent in attending my appointments with me. He has also been coming over quite frequently since the baby has started kicking, and he wants to interact with the baby, which he is welcome to do. The first couple of times that he came over, my mom steered clear of him for obvious reasons because she knew whatever he and his family believed about her, and it was quite disrespectful, so she did not want to interact with him. But by the 3rd time he came over, he actively sought her out and apologized to her and told her that he was really sorry for falling for whatever his mom had been feeding him, and he knew that whatever he had believed about her was wrong, and he was really ashamed of himself for allowing his mom to get into his head. He also apologized to me on the same day and told me that even though he knew that we couldn't go back to the way we used to be, he would at least like for all of us to put our differences aside, and now that he was openly addressing the problems, he wanted just one chance from all of us to prove that he was not a horrible guy, that he had just been misguided, and I didn't see the harm in that. We would have to co-parent our baby together anyway, so I had pretty much already forgiven him and didn't hold any grudges, and my mom also seemed fine with it, so that was that. Recently, I also spoke to him about what I had been thinking, and I told him that I did not want his mom or his uncle anywhere near our baby at any point in time, even if he decided to patch things up with them in the future, and I wanted that in writing in the child custody arrangement. I thought that I was going to find it difficult to get him to agree to that, but luckily he didn't put up much of a fight. In fact, he didn't put up a fight at all. He just told me that he could understand where that was coming from, and he was completely fine with it because right now he's not on speaking terms with either of them, and even in the future it seems unlikely that he's going to be able to patch things up with him, mostly because he doesn't want to. So that was a huge relief, and with that out of the way, we have decided to go ahead and speak to our lawyers and have the paperwork drawn up to sign off on the custody arrangement soon. Update 5. Hey guys. So last week I finally welcomed my baby girl into the world, and she's beautiful. The labor was so long that I almost lost count, but thankfully my mom was there with me every second, and even Clark showed up at the hospital as soon as I went into labor. When they finally handed over my daughter to me, it was all totally worth it. For the past couple of days, Clark has been staying with us and has been helping me and my mom out with everything. He's been sleeping on the couch and hasn't complained about anything, and I'm really grateful that he's here to help out. He seems very happy and excited about being a father, and right now, even though there are no feelings involved, we are both thrilled to be parents. Divorced or not divorced, I'm more than sure that my daughter is going to have a wonderful future. We are going to make sure of it. The custody paperwork has all been signed, and I'm glad that we got that out of the way because I don't think that we're going to have time for anything apart from our daughter in the near future. I don't think I'm going to be posting any updates either for a couple of months because I want to focus completely on my daughter. I guess every new parent will know exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm guessing this is it for now, but before I log out, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone for the lovely comments that so many of you have left for me, and please continue to shower us with blessings. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My parents sent me away to live with my uncle and never saw them again. While my uncle helped me succeed, now I own a house, a business, and finally told my bio dad he failed as a father. Back when I was just a teenager, my family experienced a devastating loss. My dad, who at the time was a successful businessman, started facing enormous financial troubles in his business. At one point, his business partner even ran away with some of the company's funds, making it impossible for my dad to keep the business afloat any longer. In the end, he was forced to shut down the business completely. Now, my father had always been a very proud man and had immense pride in his business. However, when he suddenly lost his only source of income, it made him absolutely depressed. He had always been a pillar of strength for our family, the one we all looked up to, not just for his hard work and dedication, but for the way he carried himself with dignity and grace in everything he did. His business wasn't just a source of income. It was a reflection of his dreams, his aspirations, and all the years of effort he had invested. When it crumbled, it felt like more than just a financial loss. It was as if a part of him had been taken away. For our family, this loss was not just about the money or the business itself. It was about the uncertainty that followed. Watching my father transform from the cheerful, happy man I had always known into someone who was short-tempered and constantly agitated was one of the most painful experiences of my life. It was as if the weight of his loss had drained him of the very qualities that had defined him for so long. I vividly remember those dark days when he would spend entire days in bed, a stark contrast to the energetic man he used to be. He would only come out to eat, and even then it was a quick, almost mechanical routine before he retreated back to the solitude of his bed. He seemed to have lost all interest in life outside of his room. My mom would try her best to lift his spirits. She would gently urge him to get out of bed, suggesting that he find some hobbies or even just go for a walk to clear his mind. She hoped that maybe a distraction could help pull him out of the deep sadness he was sinking into. But instead of the hopeful response she was looking for, my dad would often snap at her, telling her to leave him alone. The frustration and pain in his voice were palpable, and it was clear that he was grappling with emotions he didn't know how to handle. During this difficult time, my mom became the sole provider for our family. She was a nurse at a local hospital, and while she had always been committed to her work, the financial strain of my dad's business collapse meant she had to take on even more. The bills were piling up, and the rent was overdue. There was no choice. She had to pick up extra shifts at the hospital, often working long hours just to keep us afloat. It was hard to see her stretch herself so thin, juggling the demands of her job while also trying to hold our family together emotionally. She never complained, but I could see the exhaustion in her eyes and the weight on her shoulders. She was carrying so much, and I admired her strength, even as I worried about how long she could keep it up. The atmosphere at home during that time was always heavy and thick, with an unspoken tension that lingered in every corner of the house. My younger brother, Michael, and I did our best to avoid anything that might anger our parents, especially our dad, whose mood had become so unpredictable. Now, Michael was always the smarter one between the two of us, the kind of kid who was naturally gifted when it came to academics. He was a bit of a nerd, the type who loved burying his nose in books and solving complex problems for fun. In contrast, while I did well in school, my interests extended beyond just studying. I was passionate about basketball and had a few other hobbies that I enjoyed, which meant my grades weren't quite on Michael's level. But I always did my best, and up until that point, my mom had never had issues with it since she regularly kept track of my grades. She understood that we were different, and she valued the effort we each put into our pursuits. However, as my dad began spending more and more time at home, the dynamics in our family began to change. He suddenly had a newfound interest in our grades and would make comments about how I clearly wasn't working as hard as Michael, pointing out the differences in our academic achievements. I remember him saying things like, "If you're not going to be the best, then what's the point of even studying? Stop going to school." His words hurt, not just because they were mean, but because they clearly came from his own pain and failure after the loss of his business. It was as if he was projecting his feelings of inadequacy and loss onto me. It hurt to see him so disillusioned and to feel like I was somehow contributing to his unhappiness, even though I knew deep down that wasn't the case. I tried to focus on my studies more, hoping to impress my dad, but it was just never enough. If my mom ever showed any appreciation for my grades, my dad would quickly undermine it with taunts, insisting that there was nothing to be proud of when the grades could be much better. At first, my mom would try to defend me, reminding him that I was doing my best and that every achievement, no matter how small, deserved recognition. But as time went on, and as my dad's taunts grew more frequent and intense, something changed. Slowly, she started to join in with him, echoing his comparisons between me and Michael. They both began to tell me almost daily how much better my younger brother was doing than me and how I needed to step it up if I wanted to keep up with him in life. My dad would remind me almost every day how I was always lesser than Michael. The comparisons felt relentless, and they started to seep into every aspect of my life. Eventually, they even banned me from any after-school activities, including playing basketball. They told me that if I wanted to do better in school, I needed to concentrate solely on my studies. So, I was forced to give up the sport I loved, the one thing that allowed me to feel free and happy, and devote all my time to schoolwork just so I could be as brilliant as my brother. However, as my parents' restrictions tightened, I began to feel trapped in my own home. I was constantly on edge, waiting for their next criticism or comparison. I started to feel depressed, overwhelmed by the sense that no matter what I did, it would never be enough. There was no time for rest or relaxation. It was just a continuous cycle of studying, worrying, and trying to avoid confrontation. My dad would check up on me constantly, making sure I was studying, even if I had already finished all my assignments. He would make me feel guilty if I even took a short break. The pressure was suffocating, and it made it hard to focus on anything, let alone enjoy the things I used to love. I became so jittery around my parents that I started recognizing them by the sound of their footsteps. If I heard my dad coming up to my room, I would immediately scramble to cover my comic book with a textbook, pretending to be studying, even when I had nothing left to study. I was terrified of being caught wasting time and afraid that he would accuse me of being lazy or not taking my studies seriously. The constant fear of disappointing them, of being compared unfavorably to Michael, consumed me. This fear and anxiety bled into every part of my life. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, never knowing when the next criticism would come or what I would be accused of next. I began to lose interest in everything, even the subjects I used to enjoy, because they were now just another source of stress. The joy I once found in learning and in playing basketball was gone, replaced by a deep sense of inadequacy and guilt. I became a shadow of who I once was, constantly striving for an approval that seemed more and more unattainable. And even though I was doing everything they asked, studying harder, giving up my hobbies, and trying to be the perfect student, I never felt like it was enough. The more I tried to meet their standards, the more distant and disconnected I felt from them and from myself. A year into my dad's business going under, our family was still caught in a downward spiral. My dad hadn't been able to find a new job, and my mom was working herself to the bone trying to keep everything together while the bills kept piling up. That's when I remembered my grandmother had come to visit. I think she must have noticed right away how different our lives had become. We had once lived comfortably with everything we needed and more, but now it felt like we were just scraping by, struggling to make it through each day. I didn't know it at the time, but I think my grandmother had a serious talk with my parents about our situation. She must have seen the toll it was taking on all of us, especially on my mom, who was working endless hours, and on my dad, who was still grappling with the loss of his business and his sense of self-worth. The very next day after my grandmother's visit, my parents sat me down for a talk. I could tell right away that something was different. There was a seriousness in their expressions that made my stomach drop. They told me that they had been talking and had come to a difficult realization. They were struggling too much to take care of both me and my brother. I was taken aback, not fully understanding what they were trying to say. I asked them what they meant, my heart pounding in my chest. My dad looked at me with a heaviness in his eyes that I had never seen before, and he explained that my grandmother had suggested a solution, one that neither of them wanted to consider but felt they had to. She had pointed out that my uncle, who didn't have any children of his own, had always wanted to be a father. He and his wife had a stable life, and they would be happy to look after one of us to ease the burden on my parents and give one of us a better chance at stability. I looked confused as I heard this. My mom then chimed in, her voice trembling as she spoke. She told me that because Michael was the youngest and more academically inclined, they believed it was best for him to stay with them so that his education wouldn't be disrupted. They said they wanted me to go and live with my uncle, where I could have a fresh start and they could focus on taking care of Michael. Hearing this, I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. I was shocked and hurt. It felt like a rejection, like they were choosing Michael over me, deciding that he was more worthy of their care and attention just because he was more talented than me. I couldn't understand why they would send me away, why they thought it was okay to separate our family like this. I had always done my best despite everything that had happened, and now it seemed like none of that mattered. I started to cry and ask them if they didn't love me anymore and how I would work harder on getting better grades. But my dad shook his head and told me that they just didn't have the money to support 2 kids and assured me that I was a better match for my uncle's family anyway. My mom tried to explain how, as the oldest child, I should make this sacrifice without complaining since Michael had a better shot of becoming someone extraordinary. I remember staring at them, trying to process what they were saying. At that moment, I felt a mixture of emotions: anger, sadness, betrayal, and an overwhelming sense of loss. I knew things had been hard, but I never imagined it would come to this, that my parents would decide to send me away. It was as if the last bit of stability I had left was being taken away from me, and I didn't know how to cope with that. My parents were clearly torn also, and I could see that this decision wasn't easy for them, but it didn't make it hurt any less. In the end, I had no choice but to pack my bags and move to my uncle's place when he came to pick me up. The day he arrived, the reality of the situation finally sank in, and the weight of what was happening became almost unbearable. I remember crying a lot when it was time to say goodbye to my brother. Even though I knew I would still see him at school, the thought of not being together at home, of not sharing the same space, was heartbreaking. Michael was devastated too. He couldn't understand why our parents were doing this, why they were separating us when we had already been through so much together. I kept hoping that this was all just a bad dream, that I would wake up and things would go back to the way they were. But unfortunately, there was no waking up from it. My parents did hug me before sending me off, and while I could feel the sadness and regret in their embrace, it didn't ease the hurt. I knew they were struggling and that they thought they were making the best decision for everyone, but that knowledge didn't make the goodbye any easier. When I arrived at my uncle's place, it felt both familiar and strangely foreign at the same time. I was comfortable around my uncle and his wife. They had always been kind and welcoming, and I had spent considerable time with them over the years. But this time, things were different. This wasn't just a visit. This was supposed to be my new home. I couldn't help but wonder how many years I would be living here, away from my parents and brother, away from the life I had known. My uncle and his wife did their best to make me feel welcome. They were kind and tried to make the transition as smooth as possible. The first few nights were the hardest. I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, overwhelmed by the unfamiliarity of my surroundings. I missed my old room, the sounds of my brother moving around next door, and even the creaks of the floorboards that I had come to know so well. I missed my parents. Despite everything that had happened, the hurt was still fresh, but there was a deep part of me that longed for the comfort and familiarity of my family. As the months went by, I made an effort to adjust and make the best of the situation. My uncle and his wife were incredibly supportive, and they went out of their way to help me feel at home. It wasn't easy at first. There were moments when the homesickness hit hard, and I longed for the familiarity of my old life. But gradually, I began to see the advantages of living with my uncle. One of the biggest differences was that, unlike my dad, my uncle didn't get angry with me over small things. He was patient and understanding, which made me feel less anxious and more at ease. Although my aunt was strict about making sure I did my homework every day, she also encouraged a healthy balance. She would let me hang out with my friends after school or play basketball, just like I used to before everything changed. It felt liberating to have that freedom again, to be able to enjoy the things I loved without feeling guilty or pressured. My uncle and aunt also encouraged me to join various clubs at school and explore new hobbies. They saw potential in me, not just as a student, but as a person with interests and passions that went beyond academics. Their encouragement made a huge difference. I started to feel more confident and motivated, and with time, my grades improved considerably. School no longer felt like a burden. It became something I genuinely enjoyed. The stress and pressure that had once consumed me were slowly being replaced by a renewed sense of purpose and excitement for the future. I would see my brother Michael every day at school, and we would hang out together like we always had. He would tell me about our parents, how they were doing, and what life was like at home. Sometimes I felt a pang of jealousy, especially when he talked about the little things they did together. But at the same time, I started to realize that I fit in more with my uncle and aunt. Their home was becoming my home, and the life I was building there felt right for me. Looking back, I realized that moving in with my uncle was one of the best things that could have happened to me. It was a turning point that helped me rediscover my passion for life and learning, and it gave me the chance to become the person I wanted to be, not just the person I was expected to be. When I graduated high school, it felt like a significant milestone, not just because I was closing a chapter in my life, but because I had worked hard and the effort paid off. I got accepted into my dream university with a partial scholarship. My uncle was particularly proud of me and generously offered to fund the remainder of my college fees, which was a huge relief. My aunt, always thoughtful and caring, even organized a small get-together to celebrate my achievements. It was a warm and intimate gathering with close family and friends. My parents attended the party. However, they did not seem particularly thrilled with my success. They didn't seem overly excited about my acceptance into college, and instead pointed out almost casually how in a few years Michael might get into an even better university than I had. Hearing them say that was strange and unsettling. This was supposed to be a day to celebrate my achievements, a day where I could finally feel like I had made them proud. Yet instead of simply complimenting me and letting me enjoy the spotlight for one day, they seemed more focused on Michael's future potential than on my present success. What made it even more confusing was that I didn't see this as a competition. I would genuinely be happy if Michael got into a great university and achieved his own dreams. I loved him and wanted the best for him. But it was disheartening that my parents couldn't set aside their comparisons, even for this one day, to acknowledge my hard work and success without reminding me that they loved my younger brother more. Throughout my time at university, my parents came to visit me only a handful of times. Each visit, their conversation would inevitably shift to Michael. They talk about his accomplishments, his potential, and how proud they were of him. However, the situation took an unexpected turn when it came time for Michael to go to college. The reality of the situation was that he wasn't accepted into his first-choice university and had to settle for his second choice. While his second choice was still a good university, it wasn't the prestigious institution my parents had been hoping for. They had been banking on his acceptance into the top university as a way to boast about their younger son being superior to the older one, me. With Michael's college placement not living up to their expectations, my parents found themselves in a difficult position. They could no longer use his achievements to compare or outshine mine, which seemed to leave them frustrated. The narrative they had carefully crafted of Michael being the academic star was disrupted. Now they couldn't brag about him any longer. Although I felt a sense of vindication, I also felt a pang of sympathy for Michael. Despite the way he was used as a benchmark in my parents' eyes, he was still my brother, and I knew that he must have tried his best to get accepted into the best. Over the years, my relationship with my parents remained strained and eventually became almost non-existent. They rarely ever called me, and I stopped reaching out to them as well. After graduating from university, I landed a high-paying job across the country. I was a bit nervous about accepting, but my uncle and aunt encouraged me to give it a try. I am glad I took a chance and moved, as the opportunity allowed me to save a significant amount of money and make smart investments. 4 years ago, I was offered a senior managerial role at a major corporation thanks to my extensive experience. The salary boost has been more than sufficient for a luxurious lifestyle, and 2 years ago, I achieved one of my biggest dreams by purchasing my own home. While I haven't gotten married or had children yet, I've chosen to spend my money on myself and the things that make me happy. Meanwhile, I haven't forgotten about my uncle and aunt. I regularly keep in touch with them and make sure to send them birthday gifts and Christmas gifts each year as a token of my appreciation for everything they've done for me. I've also stayed connected with Michael, my younger brother, and continued to support him. Last year, Michael shared some troubling news with me. He had been laid off from his job at a tech company due to the economic downturn and the ongoing job crisis. Since then, he had been working on starting a business with a friend, but the venture wasn't progressing as smoothly as they had hoped. Given the challenges he was facing, he reached out to me for financial support, asking if I could invest in his business. Even though I didn't have detailed information about his business plan, I decided to invest in it blindly. My primary motivation was to show my support for Michael. I understood how tough the situation was for him and wanted to help him get back on his feet. I didn't even care if the business was going to fail because all I wanted was to have my brother's back. Fortunately, his business has started performing well, and although it hasn't taken off yet, my brother is really grateful that I believed in him when no one else did. This year, my family decided to host a grand birthday party for my grandma's 75th birthday. I was really looking forward to it, eager to reconnect with everyone after so many years. I flew down excitedly, ready to catch up with my family and celebrate the milestone. Over the years, I've changed a lot. My style, my appearance, and the way I spoke have all evolved, reflecting the comfortable and successful life I have built for myself. My parents, who hadn't seen me in 10 years and hadn't even made any effort to stay in touch, were visibly shocked by the changes. My mom awkwardly greeted me with a warm hug, which was nice. My dad, on the other hand, seemed more reserved. He nonchalantly started asking questions about my job and position, and I could see the surprise in their eyes as I shared the details with him. I mentioned that I had even bought a house for myself, which took my dad by surprise. He immediately scoffed and expressed disbelief, implying that it wasn't possible for me to achieve such a huge thing. This pissed me off, so I told him that I would never lie about owning a house and that not everyone is a loser who depended on his wife for financial support like he had for all these years. This comment took my dad by surprise. However, before he could argue, I went on to add, "Growing up, your lack of faith in me was incredibly painful. It felt like no matter what I did, it was never good enough. I faced constant criticism and was always compared to Michael. However, I am not that little boy anymore. I am doing quite well for myself, not that I have to prove it to you, but the fact that you can't recognize my achievements even after all the things I've done speaks more about your inability to see beyond your own insecurities than about me." It's clear that you still struggle with accepting my success, and frankly, that's your problem, not mine. My dad looked taken aback, since he clearly didn't expect me to push back. I also pointed out to him how I was the only one who had invested in his talented son's business, when Michael had no other prospects. So, my dad needed to get his head out of the gutter and start respecting the person I had become over the years. I knew my words were sharp and that they were likely to hurt. I saw the hurt in his face. However, a part of me felt justified in standing up for myself since he had always just dismissed me. Ever since the party, my mom has been calling me, expressing how deeply I hurt my dad with my comments. She has asked me to apologize to him for disrespecting him since my words left him feeling embarrassed. She says I had no right to point out that he still depended on mom for money. In turn, I have refused to back down and apologize to him, citing speaking the truth to my dad. Update 1. Just to clarify a few things, my dad never returned to work after his business failed. He attempted a few different things, but he didn't like working a regular 9-to-5 job. As a result, my mom has continued to support him financially while he takes on the role of a house husband and does occasional freelance consulting work. Michael is aware of the strained relationship I have with our parents. He has never supported or participated in their favoritism. My brother genuinely loves me and has always tried to support me whenever he can. Back when our parents sent me to live with my uncle, Michael was still young and couldn't do much to help at the time. I think the main reason that my parents clearly dislike me is because I remind them about their failures. They clearly abandoned me when things got tough, hoping that by getting rid of me all their problems would be gone or at least that their lives would improve. However, they continued to face financial difficulties while I thrived under my uncle's care. It must have felt like a slap in the face for them. Also, they never expected me to become successful in my life, so they just can't wrap their heads around it. My uncle and aunt never pressured my parents to take me back, as they were genuinely happy to have me with them. They consider me their son, though they never imposed themselves on me and allowed me to shape our relationship on my own. Over the years, they've observed my parents' favoritism toward Michael, and I think that's why my aunt and uncle have been so fiercely protective and loving towards me. They provided me with everything that my parents could never give me. Update 2. I agree with a lot of y'all that I should not have to apologize to my dad when he was the one who had been rude to me. Hence, I decided to write an email to my parents detailing how I have felt about them all these years and how disappointed I am that they never apologized. I wrote this email from the bottom of my heart and recounted each and every incident that I remembered where they had failed me as parents. I told them how desperately I needed them as a child, yet now I couldn't care less about their existence since they had always abandoned me. After reading my email, I guess it must have opened their eyes to how deeply they had hurt me because my mother called me crying and apologizing for ever agreeing with my dad and sending me to stay with my uncle. She explained that they had no other choice at the time and confessed that seeing the pain in my eyes whenever we met afterward made her hate herself. She admitted that this guilt was one of the main reasons she had distanced herself over the years. I told her that her reasons no longer mattered to me because our relationship was beyond repair. I no longer considered her and Dad as my parents. This deeply upset my mother, and she repeatedly asked me to let things go so we could start fresh. In the meantime, my dad hasn't made any effort to contact me, though my mom did mention that he was emotional after reading my email. I can only hope he feels at least some remorse for what he did to me years ago. For now, I have chosen to maintain distance from my parents as I have always done in the past. Update 3. It's been a while since I updated here. Since sending that email to my parents, I felt a sense of relief and emotional release. It has been a cathartic experience, and I feel much lighter now knowing that I finally spoke my mind to them. I've continued to maintain a relationship with my brother regardless of my parents, and I will always support him as usual. Next month, I plan to take my uncle and aunt on a much-needed vacation to one of their dream destinations. My aunt has talked about this place for years, and I'm excited to surprise them with it. Now on to the next story. Story 6. I worked 2 jobs and hired a nanny to support my wife, but on Father's Day, she mocked me, saying no woman would want me. I filed for divorce. I am 43 and have always done my best to support my wife, F38. Our 2 children, 3 and 5, and my mother-in-law. I'd like to think I've done a decent job over the years. I fought to better our family's living conditions. I not only finished another bachelor's degree and just received a master's degree in a STEM-related profession, but I also worked 2 full-time jobs while pursuing my second bachelor's degree. In addition, I helped my wife complete her education. She obtained a degree that allowed her to earn a good living, about $70,000 per year in a healthcare profession with numerous career prospects. However, after the birth of our 2 children, she decided to give up her work and become a stay-at-home parent for the time being. Initially, it was difficult for us while I was finishing my master's degree. However, after finishing it and our youngest turning 3, my work expanded, and we were able to live comfortably as a single-income home. While we are far from wealthy, we make do with a household income of roughly $150,000 plus bonuses. This past year, things became hectic for my wife, so even though I now work 75% from home, I budgeted to hire a daytime nanny to help her around the house and with one child while the other is at school. My day begins every morning at 5:30 or 6 a.m. I get the house ready for the day before the nanny arrives at 8 a.m. I prepare our oldest for school, cook breakfast, and plan my day. I drop off our oldest at school and get back home in time to allow the nanny in. My professional duties have recently required me to work from home for the next 2 months. Therefore, I am now completely remote. While convenient, my days are full of meetings as I manage worldwide teams and oversee industry projects. After a month and a half of working from home, I realized that my wife's routine began considerably later than anticipated. She starts her day about 10 a.m. I asked my mother-in-law and the nanny if this was typical, and they both agreed that it was, with minor variations. My wife gets up, cooks, briefly glances through her phone, or purchases from home. While I'm delighted I can give her this lifestyle because we both grew up with limited financial resources, it's becoming a source of irritation for me. I recognize the risk of postpartum depression, the burden of having children, and the likelihood that I am not a great husband. However, I have assured that everything is taken care of and then some. She said she was too busy to manage the home finances, so I do. I pay all of the household payments, my personal bills, her personal bills, as well as my mother-in-law's medical bills and car debt. I also take care of the house appliances, cars, and pets. Despite this, she often implies that my life is easier than hers. Whenever I try to decompress or express my troubles with her, she seems to feel the need to outdo me. If I had a horrible day, hers was far worse. My feet suffer from walking during work trips, but nothing compares to her standing and cooking as a toddler clings to her. For the past few years, she has frequently told me that I have ruined her life and possibilities, but when I remind her of these comments, she rejects them or avoids accountability. My mother-in-law has approached me and indicated that she has observed a difference in both myself and my wife. I've become closer to my children, and I've hugged the dogs and told them more about my life than I have to my wife. I feel like I'm in emotional survival mode, one step away from climbing the corporate ladder and finding love and comfort at the bottom of a whiskey bottle. I'm sure the manly men of Reddit will accuse me of being wimpy, but I'm not a machine. Apart from my children, all I want is to feel acknowledged and loved by someone I prioritize. I'm also confident I'll hear from stay-at-home mothers, which is fine. I understand their challenges because I grew up in a single-parent household. However, with the assistance of her mother and a babysitter 5 days a week for one toddler while the other attends school, can anyone honestly claim that my wife is facing the traditional problems of a stay-at-home parent? Neither my single-parent friends nor my colleagues would say that. I know the community will probably think this is poorly written fanfiction, but it is what it is. Thank you for your replies. To add some context, I've never cheated. I work in an industry with a huge female population, but I am very open about my profession. My wife has access to my work agendas and correspondence in case she needs to check. However, she still has no idea what I do for a living. We have tried as a family, including her parents and mine, to urge her to attend treatment, but she either refuses or finds ways to avoid it. Unlike me, who grew up in a single-mother environment with some interaction from my biological father, she grew up with both parents in an allegedly monogamous marriage spanning more than 40 years. I've tried to talk to her about everything, even my sentiments, but every conversation has devolved into one-upmanship. I've been questioning myself about what I'm getting out of this marriage. Aside from my 2 lovely children, there's very little. Our sex life is practically non-existent, especially since last year. I've tried to be compassionate, figuring it's due to sadness or other issues she's having. But it's difficult not to wonder if I'm unappealing to her or bad in bed. Despite temptations and possibilities, I've never given in because, as cliché as it may seem, I genuinely love my wife and want to be with her only. To her credit, I want to avoid being prejudiced, so I'll mention her efforts. She gets up and prepares meals for everyone in the house. Myself, the kids, my mother-in-law, and even the nanny. Aside from breakfast, she prepares all other meals and snacks. She does both the kids and her own laundry, but she rarely folds or stores it. I do my own washing and send my work clothing to the dry cleaner. She keeps care of the pantry and fridge while I buy goods and organize delivery. She cleans our bathrooms and house roughly half of the time. The remaining 50% is done by my mother-in-law, myself, or maybe the nanny if she feels like being especially helpful. Prior to hiring the nanny, my mother-in-law was my wife's primary supporter, but when she developed unanticipated medical issues, I opted to seek more aid. This was especially important when my mother-in-law was receiving treatment and recovering. Update 1. I'm not sure who will read this, but I want to thank everyone who has reached out and offered kind thoughts. I wanted to provide an update. The following weekend, I showed my wife this post and all of the comments, and she read them. Long story short, we had a disagreement. She left to live with her sister, and I have been a single parent ever since. Unfortunately, my pattern has remained largely unchanged, with the exception of saying goodnight to the kids. I don't have much else to say except a heartfelt thank you for your words of support. This post has gotten far more than I planned from what began as an event, but I have still answered a few comments. Thank you to everyone who offered kind thoughts and even joked about ruining your life. It's been the highlight of my day/night as I sit here drinking with my dog while everyone else is asleep. It's a little upsetting to realize that I'm looking to strangers on the internet for validation. Yet here I am. Update 2. First and foremost, thank you for all of your comments and direct messages. I recognized my initial piece was emotionally charged because I wrote it right after another dispute. I would like to add additional context and clarification. Following the birth of both children, my wife underwent postpartum depression screenings at their pediatrician's office. She received great marks for both of her children and was advised to seek therapy. Her score improved much more after we had our second child. I made every effort to get her the assistance she required, but she refused. My mother-in-law and nanny stepped in to offer more assistance. I understand that others may blame me for staying in this scenario, but that is one of the reasons I am not ready to give up and file for divorce. I know that silently suffering isn't good, especially for our children, but I'm also concerned that a bitter, hate-filled divorce will leave lasting wounds. Some have compared it to taking off a bandage, claiming that while it will sting at first, the agony will pass. Still, I don't want my kids to believe that their parents hated each other because of them or some other mistake. I mentioned to a few individuals via DM that I've been prepared for every what-if situation. As a former project manager who has worked with teams and budgets, planning comes easy to me. As a result, I've consulted with 3 lawyers to better grasp our rights and entitlements. I even have a draft settlement ready and on hold just in case. I know what I want and I'm willing to go above and beyond for the children's welfare, but I also have a backup plan in case we have to go to court. I realize it is entirely my fault that I am suffering in silence, but I am too stubborn to give up. I put up with this to make my children's lives as normal as possible, to guarantee that my mother-in-law's treatments continue uninterrupted, and to keep hoping that my wife will ultimately give therapy a chance and that we may all get to a better place together. Thank you again for your kindness and support. I just wanted to notify those who have contacted me via DMs and comments. I apologize in advance for the lengthy post. It is odd and coincidental that I am writing this follow-up during Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, but I desperately need an outlet other than my therapist. Please accept my apologies if this does not result in the dramatic storybook finale or relationship ruin that some may anticipate. To summarize, my wife left, returned as if nothing had occurred, centered everything around her, and nothing has changed. I'm still suffering mentally, knowing deep down that nothing will get better, but I'm trying to stay strong for the kids. There's been plenty of takeout and emotional weariness. My wife attempted to return the following day and take the children to her sister's residence. Naturally, I was against it, as was her entire family, including her sister. It wasn't fair to remove our children from their home, nor was it fair to inflict financial and housing burden on her family, especially because my wife doesn't work. Her sister already had a spouse and 3 children, so adding 2 more was not an option. Fortunately, the children stayed with me at the house they know. After a little more than a week, my wife appeared to have cooled off and believed it was okay to simply walk back into the home with her luggage, as if she had just returned from a fast trip to Target. She came into my office when I was on a conference call with my colleagues. I couldn't immediately drop everything because it was such a busy period of the quarter, which annoyed her. After I concluded the call and closed my laptop, she started ranting at me about how much I don't care about her or her health. I could only gaze at her and shake my head. My mother-in-law heard the commotion and dragged her away, urging her to quit pestering me. Meanwhile, the nanny kept our smallest child out of the fight in another room of the house. That night, once the kids were sleeping, I sat alone in my office with a drink, like I had done most nights lately. My wife entered, and we spoke, argued, sobbed, and drank together. One thing led to another, and we found ourselves in bed. I wish I could say it was a time of reconciliation, but the following morning was sobering in more ways than one. As we lay there, she began talking not about us, but about how terrible her absence had been. She discussed her difficulties staying at her family's home in her old room with her father and her sister's family. She went on to say how fortunate I am to be able to stay in our house, do what I do, and not be as stressed as she or her family. She compared her trials to everyone else's easy existence, despite the fact that we had identical childhoods. That morning, my head and heart broke, and I've been on a downward spiral ever since. In the last week, I attempted to reconcile and have a meaningful talk. I wanted to communicate my present stress and fears about life and job in general, but the conversation quickly turned into a shouting fight. My response was, "I'm struggling too. Doesn't my happiness, stress, or overall well-being matter to you?" Her response, "Do you know how hard this is for me? You're supposed to help me be happy." I replied, "So when it comes to my happiness, stress, and needs, I'm supposed to just get over it, right?" My spouse, "We all have our own problems. You need to figure it out and get over them. I don't recognize the woman I live with anymore. She is not the person I married or promised to spend my life with and raise our children with." Since that chat, I've become increasingly distant. I've been sleeping at my office on the couch or in my children's beds after putting one to sleep. Still, it doesn't change the reality that my wife starts her day at 10 a.m., talks on the phone with her mom groups, and cooks meals while my mother-in-law and nanny care for the kids. Nothing has changed, and I doubt that it ever will. Unfortunately, I believe that even if we divorced, nothing would change because my wife's departure caused little disruption other than more takeout meals. My biggest worry is not just losing my wife but also losing my children in the process. It's sad to admit that, like many of the men and women I've spoken with here, I'll continue to smile and suffer in silence. Update 3. I am done. At Father's Day dinner, my wife told the therapist and our family that I don't do enough. She was served with divorce papers right then and there. She's furious, of course, and is attempting to act flawless right now while I continue to care for our children, my mother and my mother-in-law. Well, if that means ruining her perfect existence, then so be it. Second, to clear up any confusion, I did not earn 2 bachelor's degrees and a master's degree while working 2 full-time jobs, as some readers have believed. Here's what truly happened. Bachelor's number 1. I graduated in the early 2000s. Bachelor's degree 2. I completed it later through online courses, taking 2 classes every semester while working 2 full-time jobs. One at a hospital, 36 to 48 hours per week, and the other at a big box shop, 32 to 40 hours per week, spread over 7 days. I took on these jobs to cover both my and my wife's tuition when she wanted to return to school before we had children. Master's degree. After earning my second bachelor's degree and entering my present industry, I worked one job while also pursuing my master's. No, I did not complete 3 degrees at once, and I'm amazed I even have to explain this. Working 2 jobs while in school is not uncommon. At least I didn't believe it was. My wife prefers not to work. Despite the fact that she technically has a job, she scarcely works, and we sometimes forget she has one. For example, she only worked one 8-hour shift around 5 months ago. Her manager, who is very supportive, gives her flexible PRN scheduling and a list of days when she can pick up work. She simply chooses not to work anymore. Despite this, she constantly complains to our family about how her career is on hold for one reason or another, despite the fact that she has ample opportunities to work if she so desires. Considering everything, she has a strong network to rely on, whether it's our family, her career, or me. I've made several offers and taken considerable measures to facilitate her return to work, such as hiring a nanny, having my mother-in-law move in, and keeping a work-from-home schedule to accommodate her. Still, here we are. I am already in therapy for myself because my job can be psychologically and physically demanding. Since I can't receive the support I need at home, mentally or physically, I've chosen therapy over seeking consolation elsewhere or at the bottom of a bottle. I've tried to explain my concerns to my wife, but as I indicated in my earlier piece, she has a history of outperforming me, and here we are. My in-laws are still married. Given the conditions in our household, my mother-in-law moved in to help my wife, while my sister-in-law and her family returned to their parents' home for personal reasons. This agreement allows my sister-in-law and her family to save money as they rebuild their lives, and my wife and I benefit from my mother-in-law's assistance, allowing us to keep a closer eye on her while she receives her bi-monthly treatments. My wife is suspected of having postpartum depression, PPD, based on questionnaire results, as well as a history of symptomatic OCD and ADHD, among other ailments. She has repeatedly declined evaluations and denied the outcomes. I knew what I was getting into when I married her, and I loved and accepted my wife's imperfections as much as she did mine, at least at the moment. Spare me the, "I don't feel sorry for you," and "I pity you." I am just like any other man who fell in love and wanted to give his person the best of himself and the world he could provide. But again, here we are. There are many manly men out there, or members of the so-called Red Pill Nation, who may blame me for remaining in this scenario. While I understand different points of view, I'll be honest. If this scenario had simply touched my life, I would have left long ago. But as one Redditor once stated in a previous comment that remained with me, I am the kind of person who will take a bullet for his kids. Perhaps this was said in a different context, but to protect my children from harm, whether physical or mental, I would take the proverbial bullet if necessary. I'd like to think that other fathers feel the same responsibility to protect their children. That is why I have endured so much. For the time being, I'd rather my wife utilize me as an outlet for whatever her troubles are, rather than projecting her negativity onto our children. Thank you all for your comments and support. I've met a lot of strangers who've turned into excellent Reddit pen friends, and some of them have followed my adventure from start to finish. I'm shocked at how far this has spread across many subreddits and platforms. Whether you love me, loathe me, or think it's all a lie, thank you for all of your critical feedback and DMs. My children and I are going to be fine moving forward. Update 4. The end of an era. This will be shorter than some of you imagined, as there isn't much left to say other than to answer lingering questions and give Reddit the "I told you so" moment. After a strong push from relatives and an intervention, my wife and I eventually tried marriage counseling. I'm sure many of you can predict how it went. Blame, tears, regrets, and gaslighting, with a side of, "I am the reason her life is ruined and horrible." This time, however, it happened in front of a certified therapist rather than her Redditor mom groups. Finally, whatever the therapist suggested or noted went over her head and was ignored because it contradicted her current situation. One thing to note is that the therapist asked my wife to recollect the last time she felt truly joyful. How did she respond? About 12 or so years ago. Let me point out that 12 years ago, she was still in her 20s, childless, and living with her ex. It was a very different period and situation in her life. I know it's petty of me, but if that's when she was last happy, it's not impossible for her to find happiness again, especially because her ex is still in the same apartment, job, and position in life as he was 12 years ago. That is okay if you choose to spend your life that way. But what about me? Going clubbing 3 to 4 days a week in my 40s with kids is no longer fun for me. Of course, I do not want my children to be around a mother and company who are obsessed with White Claws. To clarify, my wife has not physically cheated on me as far as I know. However, I cannot say for certain whether she has been emotionally unfaithful, if that is the correct term. After the therapy session, I reviewed her phone records and found nothing strange, but I didn't bother checking applications like Instagram and Snapchat. I know I'm probably boring, but kudos to all the Costco parents that spend Sunday Funday making rounds with their kids for samples. The next weekend was Father's Day. As expected, it was not a grand celebration as it is for many fathers out there. Our family gathered together for a cookout and some quality family time, but my wife treated it like any other day. Sleeping in, cooking, shopping on her phone, and half-heartedly attempting to play with the kids. During the family barbecue, my wife complained of feeling poorly and hung about for the majority of the day while the rest of the family enjoyed themselves. When everything was set up and we were all seated at the table, her parents, her sister's family, my mother, and our children, it was a fantastic spread. Nothing extravagant, just a lovely supper for everybody. I was talking to my brother-in-law about our kids' school Father's Day events, and I believe my wife overheard me express how sad it was to see some kids sitting alone at the breakfast with dad event I attended. She burst out laughing. "It's not like you do anything anyway. I could have gone instead." I was surprised, embarrassed, and at a loss for words. The room became silent. My mother-in-law broke the awkward silence by saying, "Well, maybe if you feel that way, one of you should divorce the other." My wife looked at her mother puzzled and then chuckled mockingly in my direction. She pointed at me and said, "As if another woman would want a man like him. Just look at you." The room stayed silent. I felt angry, heartbroken, puzzled, and ashamed all at once. In classic manly man fashion, I nodded quietly, stood up, grabbed my keys, and exited the house. I drove away to fetch a drink, ignoring the pleas of my family and my children who begged me to stay. I'm not sure what was said or done while I was away because I couldn't force myself to check the house cameras. When I returned early Monday morning, the house had a completely different atmosphere. As usual, I woke at 6 a.m., prepared the house and our oldest for school drop-off, checked emails, and nothing seemed out of place. As I was getting ready to go, I noticed my wife lying in our bed, quietly snoring. All I could do was gaze at her and reflect on what we had and what we've lost. I've decided I'm finished. I can't do it anymore. That morning, I texted my lawyer to proceed with delivering her divorce papers. Fast forward to last week, and she was served in our home. I had no choice but to be there because I work from home. She had a mini meltdown, coming into my office and screaming, "How could you do this to me?" Her mother intervened, sparking charges that I had turned her entire family against her. I probably would have felt guilty if she hadn't immediately gone on to act like the perfect wife and mother for the remainder of the week. Sure, folks may say she's making an attempt, but this has always been fleeting, and we wind up right back where we started. For those who are curious, I intend to seek full or majority custody of our children. I've already committed to continuing to pay for their expenses, including insurance, tuition. Both kids will be attending private schools in the fall, medical bills, and more. My mother-in-law has been a rock of strength for me, supplementing my own mother's support during this journey. She has been the mother and wife that I wish my wife had been for me and our children. Out of respect for her and my mother's wishes, I will continue to supervise and contribute financially to her therapies. While some may believe I should cut off all contact with my wife's family, I am well aware of the difficulties associated with cancer and have direct experience as a caregiver. I'm willing to go to court if necessary, but all I want is a clean, simple divorce. My wife will not receive alimony, unlike what some Redditors and mommy groups believe. First, we live in a state where alimony is not frequently enforced. Second, she has the ability to find instant employment. Third, to avoid any problems, I will continue to pay her insurance and bills until the divorce is finalized or she gets full employment. So that's it. I'm finished and waiting for the next steps to complete everything. Sorry if this wasn't the dramatic, twist-filled story you were expecting, but that's life. I'm not sure if I'll update until everything is finished, but it'll probably be a few months, depending on whether we go to court. Now on to the next story. Story 7. A 28-year-old man is ruining my 18-year-old son's life, and I'm determined to fight back and free him from his influence. Hello, and thank you in advance for your creativity and time. I'm living in hell right now and need ideas. My son just turned 18 and is disabled. He needs and takes multiple medications and needs support at school. He does well in some settings and is on track to graduate and pursue trade school with support, and we're so proud of him. He's extremely impressionable, a little socially awkward, and desperate for friends. For years we've struggled because he gives his possessions away, gets in bad situations, someone offering to sell him rocks at a park, him thinking they are collectible polished gemstones so he asks to see them, and then freaks out when he realizes they're drugs, and is easily bullied. He will do anything to be liked, which breaks my heart, and we're working on it in therapy with trusted adults, etc. The grown man. This guy is 28 years old. Let's call him Quentin. He's frequently homeless, often sleeping in a tent in parks, or he'll get a voucher from our city to stay in a motel. He has 2 pit bulls, not spayed or neutered, that he will leave in the tent or motel room when he works at a fast food job. I actually have compassion for him and his animals if he had nothing to do with my son. It started with him asking my son to watch his dogs in the park while he worked. My son is so thrilled to have a friend and be helping, and he does love animals, so he will spend 8+ hours a day or night alone in a park watching these dogs. He would ask if he took dog food, toys, and blankets from our house for Quentin's dogs. He does it whether we say yes or no. Months ago, we would say yes because I appreciate that my son wants to help these dogs. Starting a few months ago, when my son turned 18, Quentin told him he didn't have to stay with us and could stay with him. For weeks, our son was sleeping in the tent with the dogs or roughing it in the park. Quentin gives him beer and weed. Our son will watch the dogs for entire shifts while he works. Quentin tells him he will help him get a tent and vouchers too. The police are sympathetic, especially because my son has disabilities and also some medical issues, but he is 18. School is supportive, but he's almost at graduation, and again, he's 18. We had not ever pursued medical conservatorship or anything like that because, before now, lots of things were going right, and we don't take that lightly, removing civil liberties from another young adult. In the past week, Quentin got another room at the motel. He messaged my son to come stay with him, and he did. My son sat in the room and watched his dogs while he worked, and I imagine they smoked and hung out when Quentin was not working. My son would respond to text messages from us but asserted he is an adult and can go where he wants. He missed a week of medication, school, part of his part-time job, and another important appointment. Being Quentin's friend is more important than all of these things, and he feels good helping his friend and says, "Quentin is like a brother to me. He's the best brother I've ever had." Quentin's own family has kicked him out. They are nearby. No idea who watches the dogs when my son is not available. Quentin doesn't drive, and earlier this week, my son gave Quentin his bike because he needs it more than me. Our son came home yesterday and had a complete psychiatric crisis because he's been unmedicated and probably also high/drinking for so many days. His medical issues are exacerbated. He was banging his head on the concrete floor, and when we called emergency services, he spit at the police, so they put a spit hood on him and restrained him. It was horrific, and he was begging for help. We're not sure when he will be stable enough to come home and may need a medical procedure. He was coherent today, crying, apologizing, but still 100% certain Quentin is his friend. I also feel terrible because I know that at age 18 it's a good thing for my son to be not telling us everything, having his own friends in life, etc. I look forward to that day. He does have other friends who are closer to his age, and their hanging out is more appropriate, but these other kids have busier lives and more responsibilities. They aren't available 24/7. Quentin is, and my son feels so good when his phone pings and it's his friend needing him. How can I make this man's life miserable? Or at least make it too uncomfortable or risky to keep hanging out with my son? Nothing to harm or stress the dogs, please. It's not their fault, and my son would never forgive me. Some of OP's comments. OP responded to all of them on May 9, 2024, for days later. Commenter. Sounds like you might need to pursue medical conservatorship, which I know you don't want to do, but it sounds like you definitely have grounds, and it's the lesser of two evils at this point. I don't see things ending up well without intervention. OP. Thank you for this and others who prompt me to reconsider conservatorship. I called a lawyer on Monday. I had already done research and collected that info but had a lot of hope that once sheltered work started up and he had less free time, it might not be necessary. Commenter. Pay someone to be your son's friend. That's more of a caretaker, honestly. This guy sounds at the very least like a scammer. Sometimes the only way people get deep in one scam is a second scam. It's sad, but there's literally a bot on ARL scams for recovery scams. Basically, people promise to recover your loss for some fee. It's not great, but if you could afford someone to offer better friendship and then point out that his old friend is lame, it'll be like positive peer pressure. Maybe help the person could help them join appropriate opportunities for new friendship, then phase out. OP. This is another great idea, and I appreciated the comments below here in the thread. I have reached out to some young adults older than him that might serve as mentors or fitness coaches. Hang out with him, work out, play basketball, build positive connections with people who don't wish him ill. Thank you for this. I have a few possibilities here in our area. Commenter. If it was my son, there's nothing I wouldn't do to ensure his safety and well-being. My advice would be to just make this man's life miserable. Contact his work and make complaints against him. Tell them he's selling weed or is abusive to customers. If he has a room, report him for dealing drugs and threats of violence. If he stays in the park, phone the police and claim his dogs are attacking people in the park. All anonymously, of course. Maybe nip down to the park late at night and set off a shitload of fireworks near to his tent. Do this over and over again. Make it your life's mission to ruin him. He'll move on when it all gets too much. My son is autistic too, and him being taken advantage of is a great worry for me. I hope it all works out for you. OP, thank you for this. I did contact his employer because my son isn't the only in the neighborhood Quentin is giving alcohol to. I also contacted management at his motel where he occasionally stays to let them know this person was letting a vulnerable teen stay there and miss school and meds, and that it was surely against their policy. Quentin was not happy. I contacted his work and the motel. I felt really empowered by so many of the comments here to engage around this and make his life more difficult. Commenter. Get son a dog. OP, yes, and great insight to others who mentioned maybe getting my son a dog. He actually has a medical alert service dog and other pet dogs and cat and fish, so animals are truly a special interest of his. Heartbreakingly, he will leave the service dog with us because the dog is safe and we love them. But Quentin's dogs need him. But yes, we lean on the gifts he has with animals to build other areas of his life. Commenter. Talk to the police again. OP. I just spoke to the local police again tonight. Sometimes they lean heavily on he's 18, he's an adult. But some of them, when they get to know him a bit, realize he's vulnerable and are more willing to help. Commenter. Keeping him busy. OP. Yes, son has an interview tomorrow at an animal adoption center. This is the type of setting that would keep him busy, help him feel like he's doing something important, and give him better adults to be around. Commenter. Get rid of the dogs. Go on Facebook and post how they are being abused and an intervention must take place. Get rid of the tent. Is he camping illegally? Call the cops. Get rid of Quentin. He's not good for anyone right now, not even himself. A major intervention is 100% necessary for all parties involved, for the police, for you, and for your son. There is so much to lose with inaction. OP. I did part of this evening. Son got home from the hospital last night, back on meds, stable, goes to his special interest class at school. Does great, going for a bike ride. Lo and behold, he's back out with Quentin and the dogs. It's after 10 p.m., so the park is closed. Quentin is pitching the tent. I called the non-emergency line to let the police know a homeless man with 2 pit bulls was sleeping in that park near the playground. Police went and moved him and sent son back to us. I will keep doing this. I might also fly our homes near the park to let them know there's a homeless man with 2 pit bulls who provides alcohol and weed to teens in the park near their home to help make it less comfortable for him to be there. Thank you for this advice. Commenter. You could see if Quentin would accept cash and a bus ticket to leave town. It would be the least messy way to disentangle him from your son. Or if you can round up a group of scary people in a van, man, a different kind of right out. I appreciate and applaud the autonomy you've given your son, but it's time for his own sake. OP, thank you for this. I did go find Quentin after seeing this advice and offer him cash to leave my son alone and stop taking his calls. He refused and promptly told son that I had offered. He also told my son, I'm too attached to him. Commenter. Block the number on son's phone. OP, thank you for these. Yes, we've blocked his number in the past and given son an old flip phone when smartphones were too much to manage. Help, but Quentin doesn't even always have a phone. They video chat on Instagram. They also can borrow anyone's phone, log into Insta, and communicate. Commenter. Go with him to every hangout. OP. I love this advice to crash every hangout. I started doing that tonight. Quentin was so mad. He told me I'm harassing him. He finally walked off and told my son not to follow him. Son is mad at me and parroting that Quentin says I'm too attached. Fine with me. I can do this every day. Great advice. Update 1. A few months ago, I came here asking for tips to help get a man named Quentin out of my son's life. I'm super grateful for all of the ideas and many kind words. As of today and for the last 3 months, my son is happy and healthy. We found a transitional living house for him with 5 other young men and 2 house managers and a dog. He's learning to be an adult, learning to cook, clean, and get a job. It includes therapy, gym every day, yoga, skateboarding, truly a dream come true. The house is about 40 minutes away from where Quentin lives, and my son feels he has friends, is purposeful, and feels adult and is learning and busy. They will also do job training. Before this happened, I took as much of your advice as was possible. I contacted the manager at Quentin's workplace and the motel he occasionally stays at. I told them Quentin was allowing a disabled teenager to stay with him and giving him and other teens alcohol. The manager is a local small business owner and took my information seriously. I also went to the motel and pointed out the sign that said all guests must have ID. My son does not. I told the manager I hoped he was abiding by rules or I'd contact the corporate. I also started calling the non-emergency PD line when he was camped after park closing time and leaving his dogs during the day. PD would move him along. Someone had the great advice of being his best friend and showing up all the time, so I did. Quentin wants to see my son? Hey, here I am too. I'm at the park. I'm at your work. I'm near the motel. I even prepared flyers to let others in the park neighborhood with a playground for small children know about the tent camping and unsupervised, unneutered pit bulls. Quentin got increasingly upset. He said I was stalking him and he was going to call the police. I said politely, please do. I'd love to tell the police more about what you're doing with my son and other vulnerable young people. I told him, you want to be in my son's life? I'm in your life. Up to you. I really felt bold after all of your advice and encouragement. I was willing to keep going for the long haul. In the meantime, we found a lawyer, and I started tapping into resources to find my son some kind of job training because he really wants to help and feel grown up. For a few weeks, he was working at a drugstore through a program through a local agency that was huge for him, stocking and cleaning and helping people. It also kept him busy for about a month and kind of removed Quentin slightly. Quentin either got sick of seeing me or afraid of losing his job. The location of the motel he had been staying at occasionally stopped letting him, so he had to start using another location much farther away, farther to walk to work and harder to deal with. I think he realized my son wasn't worth the trouble I was causing and just stopped contacting him. Thank you so much for all of your ideas. I was so focused on trying to fix it from my son's end as his mom. I had no idea how to actually deal with Q. You all were fantastic. Huge thanks from the mom of a happy, healthy, busy, and purposeful young adult son. Now for some comments. Commenter. Glad things in your situation are going in a positive direction, but wondering why you have to mention unneutered pit bulls in such a negative context. I'm 100% about spay and neutering all animals right now because this country is in a crisis with the homeless pet population, but I feel like your statement wasn't mentioned because of the same reason. OP. Absolutely, thank you for naming that. I'm also worried about the animals. One reason I struggled at first with what to do is if my son weren't a factor, I would feel drawn to helping Q and his animals or at least pointing him to resources for that. I have colleagues who work for organizations who help those without homes to stay with their pets, often their family. Since I wrote the first post, one of these dogs has had puppies. I also tried to help my son realize that he wasn't responsible for the dogs, and it was a hard life for all of them. Until it became clear how in danger my son was, I guess I mention it as another example of how the adult in the situation was not being responsible and how the untended dogs were not safe for themselves or other unfixed animals who might come into the park. For me, the state of the animals is also sad and one reason my son was so compelled to help, which is a negative. I feel for them and never wanted to harm or scare them. Commenter. For anybody in Houston, Texas, that may see this, I work for a nonprofit, Seer Jobs. We offer training and licensure to youth, young adults and veterans and financial literacy assistance for everybody. Our goal is long-term financial stability through training and job placement and financial education. We are completely funded by federal, state, city, and private donors. All classes, certifications, and licensure are completely at no cost to you, the member. Please look us up. Please donate if you find something that you support, and help us to continue our mission. Seer Jobs for Progress in Houston, Texas. Find us at seerjobs.org and on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and any other platform I missed. We have community events that you can participate in and help us continue to serve anybody who wishes for a brighter future. ETA. Sorry if it may sound like taking attention from OP, but our services are helping many in this situation, and we will do anything it takes to see our members succeed. I may just be admin and accounting, but I wholeheartedly believe in our organization and mission. OP, thank you, amazing. Yes, an org like yours is helping us immensely, and I'm so grateful others can help my son, and I can be his mom. Thank you for your time and work. Now on to the next story. Story 8. I was sick to my stomach when I discovered my wife's secret Google account, which contained hundreds of photos of my ex-girlfriend. I, 36, met my wife, Bailey, 33, 9 years ago through mutual coworkers, and we hit it off immediately. I fell absolutely head over heels with this woman. She was everything I was looking for. I had gotten out of a toxic, dare I say abusive, long-term relationship right before that with a woman Bailey had been acquainted with, but not friends with. I had her blocked on everything and had no contact with her since breaking up. We got married right after the tail end of the pandemic, bought our first house together, and started trying to conceive. That was difficult because Bailey has PCOS, but last year she finally gave birth to our first daughter. I'm having a blast being a dad. It's kind of a dream come true. I finally got my happy life with my perfect wife. My perfect wife until last Monday. My laptop's battery hit the bed, so I opened up Bailey's work tablet with an attached keyboard. You can set it up like a monitor, to check on some tax stuff. She wasn't home. It was just me and the baby, but we've never asked permission to use each other's devices. We've always been open like that. There's nothing for us to hide. That's what I thought. When I opened up the internet, I noticed she had the incognito tab open. Never in a million years did I expect to discover what I did. My wife has a secret Google account with a photo album saved called XX. So I clicked on it. Did I discover an affair? Nudes? Nope. In this Google album were over 300 photos, 348 actually, of my ex. The woman I was with right before I met Bailey, the woman who tormented me and made me feel worthless. The album said it was started right around the time Bailey and I started dating and was updated as recently as 2 weeks ago. The photos ranged from candid shots with family to pictures at her work functions. There were even pictures from her yearbook. I don't know how Bailey could have found her high school yearbook photos. Photos from vacations, Idaho photos, photos from work, pictures of her in crowds, screenshots of videos, and screen recordings of videos, just her. The other people in the photos would be scribbled out or the photo would be cropped and zoomed in just on my ex. There were other disturbing things I found too. There was another album with just zoomed up pictures of my ex's hair. Come to think of it, Bailey had recently started wearing her hair differently, and my ex had a very identifiable hair type. There was another album with screenshots of comments on social media. Of course, I can't find them because I have her blocked, like Facebook groups she's in and public posts. And my ex is very low-key on social media. I can't imagine the lengths Bailey went to find them. My ex literally lives in another country now. There were also different links to the exact outfits she was wearing, like very specific blouses and trousers you'd have to really go looking for to find. A specific water bottle I remembered purchasing, and identical hiking boots and sandals. So basically, my partner of almost a decade has been a single white female. My girlfriend has secretly stalked her to the point of buying her exact clothes and changing her hair. And now I'm starting to realize Bailey's new interests over the years were just my ex's. Bailey has turned herself into my ex. Everything feels like a lie. Our love feels like a lie. The things we share feel like a lie. I threw up and had a panic attack. I looked at our daughter and felt betrayed. I haven't confronted her yet. I don't know if I want to. I want to run away with our daughter. I want to print out all her pictures, leave them on the table and disappear. I don't know what to do. I just want to throw up. Relevant comments. Comment 1. Holy cow, that definitely is alarming. The best thing to do is address it now to see what'll change. If she no longer has someone to replicate, the toxic side of me would slowly start mentioning things like, you know, you really do remind me of someone, and nonchalantly bite into an apple and walk away. OP. I feel like what's worse is that she's subtly made these changes over time under my nose. So my ex has a specific career, and Bailey didn't express interest in switching careers to the exact same thing until after I had mentioned what my ex did. I didn't notice at the time, but I remember telling her, X went to school for that. The hair was more recent. The outfits and objects slowly over time. The interests. I'm not sure how much she's stolen personality-wise from my ex and what she actually likes. It's all incredibly exhausting and confusing. Comment 2. I'm so sorry. This sounds like something out of creepypasta. OP. I'm actually surprised with the amount of support I've gotten here in the last hour. Haha. Believe it or not, there are no other red flags in our marriage. Now I don't know what else I've missed. OP added, while I talked about my ex, most of the things I told my wife about were negative and painted her in not such a good light. My wife knows these things and knows they were traumatic. Of course, I've mentioned things like what she does for a living and things she used to do. I think everything else she found she got through intense cyberstalking through my ex's friends and family. The yearbook photos, I have no idea. Edit. Remove specific info so I don't accidentally dox myself. Update 1. I'm pretty sure I accidentally got my original post removed just now because I tried to update it with a link to my update. Oops. Anyway, I'm the guy who found the Google Drive full of pictures of my ex. So I was not expecting my original post to go viral on YouTube and TikTok and have so many responses. Yikes. I am overwhelmed by the support. I am humbled by the number of people who have been through this experience on both sides. I have an update, but it's probably not as exciting and as juicy as you want. It's not bad though. First, let me clear things up. If people think this post is fake because it doesn't make sense or are trying to conceive timeline is short or the way I worded things makes it look like a teenager or woman wrote it, continue to think that because it means I've successfully been vague enough and worded things to not accidentally dox myself. Believe this is a creative writing exercise so I don't embarrass myself for real. No, I didn't actually throw up. I was in the middle of a panic attack. Private browse tabs were open to the websites with clothing and objects. Another tab was signed into Google Photos. When I exited the Google Photo tab to look at the websites with clothing and came back, it was already signed out and I couldn't get back in. A lot of the clothing I recognized wasn't because I remembered my ex wearing them. There were more recent pictures of her in the file wearing them. And I remember the day Bailey bought the water bottle that also happened to be in the folder. The hair. Bailey and my ex are the same race and my ex wore braids in a particular way. Not so particular that it's exclusive to my ex because Bailey has also worn different braids. But seeing pictures of her made me put 2 and 2 together. Is there any way Bailey could have gotten with me in an attempt to get to my ex? Was Bailey possibly obsessed with my ex before she met me? Probably not, because Bailey grew up here and my ex originally moved here for university. And while you can drive across the border, it's not that easy, and I don't think Bailey was going back and forth to stalk her in person. Also, the reasons why my ex and I broke up have nothing to do with Bailey, and she could not have had any involvement. On to the actual update. The next day when I had calmed down, I called several social workers and therapists. I was planning to confront her there. Unfortunately, the only places that take our insurance did not have an opening for another couple weeks. So despite what a lot of you think, I've known my wife for nearly a decade, and even while I was confused and upset and doubting things, I didn't think she'd be a danger to me. We took the baby to grandma's and I asked her to go for a walk with me. I did not beat around the bush and straight up told her I found the folder. Her face got very red and she was frozen, but also tried to play dumb at first. I was persistent, and she started crying and begged me not to leave her. This is what I uncovered. Bailey first started looking up my ex out of curiosity to keep tabs, I guess, but over time it became more pathological. It's like she got addicted to it. But she also wanted to please me. Okay, maybe I talked about my ex a lot more than I thought, and Bailey wanted to emulate the good parts. She told me she really doesn't know who she is, and my ex's image was something she latched onto because she had me. First, finding information about her became a game. Finding the clothing and objects became a game by searching things like blue water bottle green stripe, until the couple compared the product to a photo and found the exact one. The reason why I couldn't find the post wasn't because I had blocked my ex, but because my ex had made a new Facebook under a different name. Bailey found her profile by searching up a family member. She made fake social media and added enough mutual friends until she could see my ex's posts and until her private Instagram accepted her. She weaseled her way into her exercise Facebook group where the videos were posted and searched her school on a yearbook website to find the yearbook pictures. Over time, she just collected the images and would get excited to find something new despite the fact that my ex is extremely private on social media. The folder had originally been called Hex the Ex. In case I discovered it, she was going to make the excuse of saving the pictures to put a hex on her. When she made a burner Google account, she deleted the old folder and named the new one XX. Then she got sloppy and comfortable, and that's right around the time I just happened to open the work tablet. We took a break. It was a while. We made it to couples counseling, and Bailey and I also began seeing separate therapists. She still has not had an assessment with a psychiatrist, but it's on the list. She promised to stop and deleted the album in front of me. Slowly, certain clothing items began to disappear from the closet. I still do not entirely trust her, and that is for me to work on. I'm afraid she has another secret account somewhere, like a backup. The physical mimicking is actually stopping though, including the hair change. We're still not okay. I want us to be okay, and it's okay if that takes time. If we end up not being okay, then that's something I have to deal with. What I do know is that my wife is incredibly insecure, probably mentally ill, and is misled. I don't really want to walk away from that. Although this probably isn't the most exciting update, I appreciate the private messages. I just couldn't get back to Reddit cares and links to resources. I'm not sure how I feel about social media, YouTube, and TikTok picking up on my story though. That's wild. Until next time, if I ever give another update, I hope it's a good one. Relevant comments. Comment. The outcome does not look positive. Why stay in a one-sided relationship? At least put a plan together that runs concurrently so you're prepared should it not work out. Seek legal advice, prepare evidence, and don't do anything stupid. At least then you will be in a better place either way. OP. A plan is something I'm still having trouble coming up with, and it's been a couple months. I think I'm afraid to make a plan. Does that make sense? Now on to the next story. Story 9. My dad wants me to apologize to his girlfriend's children for calling out their racist comments about my race. Bear with me. I'll try my very best to keep this as short as possible. My parents split when I was 23 and my sister was 20. They were such a poor match, and I'm surprised they lasted so long. And both of us breathed a bit of a sigh of relief when they split. Everyone was immediately happier, and since then, both of our parents have found new partners. I've always had a good relationship with my dad, albeit a bit of a strained one. My dad is a fair bit less politically correct than I am, and I'm hardly PC at all, trust me. He calls things that are stupid or that he doesn't like gay. He uses the word to describe gay people, thinks Hillary Clinton would be a bad president because she'd nuke everyone on her period, and laments that he can't use the N-word in public. He's the epitome of out of touch, late 50s, Lily white guy is what I'm saying. I love my dad, and while these things bother me, there's literally no changing him, so I have to just bear it when I'm hanging out with him. An important note is that while my dad says some sexist, homophobic things, he never does so in public. At the very least, he knows when to keep his opinions to himself and his family. Recently, my dad's been seeing this woman, let's call her Iris. Iris has 2 kids as well, 29M and 27F. I don't really know Iris very well. I met her earlier this year at my dad's place, but only very briefly as I was dropping off a few things with my dad. My sisters never met her before, and neither of us has met her kids before. My dad really likes this woman, so he wants all of us, both sets of kids, to get to know each other and the parents so we can all be a blended family. Despite my dad's political incorrectness, he can be adorable sometimes. So Dad invited us all out to dinner. My sister's known to be a bit bristly with strangers, so I told her to be on her best behavior because I want our dad to be happy, and I didn't want to offend Iris or her kids. So we sit down and all start trying to get to know each other. My dad chose a Mexican restaurant to take us out to because it's our whole family's favorite type of restaurant. My mom is Mexican, and growing up, we had the most bomb-ass, authentic Mexican food all the time. Since my mom and dad split, my dad has been trying to fill the hole my mom's great cooking left in his belly, so to speak, and is a taqueria junkie. Also important to note, me and my sister, despite being half Mexican, have really white skin. We have obviously Mexican features, or at least I think they're obviously Mexican, but everyone always assumes we are of white European descent because of the color of our skin. So we sit down with Iris and her kids, and immediately her kids start complaining. These are grown-ass adults complaining that half of the menu is in Spanish. Next to each thing on the menu was the Spanish name and the English name, and all the descriptions were in English, so it wasn't like an English speaker couldn't read it. I am near fluent in Spanish, and my sister speaks passively, and we're both in school to become English as a second language teachers. But we tried to settle the hair on the backs of our necks and ignore them. We actually managed to have a pleasant convo with them otherwise until the waiter comes over to get our drink orders. Iris's son snapped at the waiter like a dog to get his attention and take his order first, and her daughter spoke in a highly condescending voice, very slowly, like this man working at a restaurant that caters to big, fat white people couldn't understand damn English. Iris was normal, thank God. But when the waiter, blessed his jolly soul, he was so kind despite being treated like an idiot by those two, left, her son remarked that he didn't expect the service to be very good. I don't even know if he could understand us. My dad has been to this place before, so he said, "No, the service here is great. You're going to love this food. I recommend." I can't remember what exactly he recommended, trying to smooth things over. And then the son says, "Not like I could understand him either with that god-awful accent. These people need to learn English if they want to come to America, probably illegal or some." Me and my sister are generally nice, kind people, but no one has ever accused us of being patient or suffering fools silently. So because we're petty, we just gave each other a look and started speaking only in Spanish to one another for the rest of the night. I felt bad because Iris looked mortified, but it felt so good to be so petty. For the next hour or so through dinner, we, of course, switched to English to talk to Iris or her kids, but with each other and my dad, who can understand it but not speak it, we spoke the most rapid, fluent Spanish we could muster. And at every opportunity, my sister would try to mention that we were Mexicans and had grown up in a Hispanic household with our mom and her extended family. Since then, my dad's been texting and calling us, mostly me because I'm usually the ringleader of these sorts of things, begging for us to apologize to Iris's kids for embarrassing them. I'm sure my dad didn't know they were going to be so racist towards Mexicans, or else I'm sure he wouldn't have invited them to go out for Mexican food. But I know he doesn't even think what they said was that racist. He said that they could have been worse, and there was no need for you to humiliate them and Iris like that. I agree, Iris was lovely. I should have taken her feelings into account, and I have no problem calling or meeting her to apologize for acting so petty and childish. But damn it, I do not want to apologize to racists for pointing out and not taking their racism sitting down. Is that so wrong? What should I do? Am I just being petty about this too? I don't want to make my dad unhappy, but I know he's not a good judge of what is and isn't racism, and I don't feel like I should apologize for slapping a couple of racist adult brats down. TLDR. Dad's new girlfriend's kids were racist against Mexicans. Didn't know sister and I are half Mexican. Sister and I spoke nothing but Spanish to each other for the night to embarrass them. Dad now wants us/me to apologize to them for embarrassing them. What do you do? Top comments. Comment 1. Brown is not freed. Haha. Nice. And don't apologize. Comment 2. He said that they could have been worse. Yeah, well, so could you. They're lucky you went with the indirect reminder that they have no idea who might be listening to or offended by their bigotry, rather than calling them out for everyone in the restaurant to hear. Tell Dad and Iris that you realize her children's ignorance doesn't reflect on her, but they should feel embarrassed over what they did, and you think it's best to avoid future family dinners until they understand where they went wrong and apologize to you. Update 1. So I thought I'd come back to update y'all. My sister and I talked about it with our mom, who has always been much calmer than us. She laughed at us speaking nothing but Spanish and said she wished she'd been there to see Iris's kids' faces. She did tell us to just apologize, though, because she knows how our dad can hold grudges over tiny things like this. We didn't really want to do that, though, so I contacted Iris and asked if she and I could meet up for coffee and talk about everything that happened. She was super apologetic when we met for coffee and said a lot of her kids' funny ideas come from their bio dad, who is a patriotic Republican. The way she kind of sugarcoated everything about it makes me think maybe she doesn't necessarily think what they did was wrong in general, just that she was sorry my sister and I happened to be part Mexican and that what they did offended us. Anyway, it was just me and Iris at a Starbucks. My sister wasn't there. She's grown incredibly apathetic to the incident in a very short amount of time. That's just the way she is. And I said, I understand. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. My dad has some opinions I don't agree with at all too. But that it was rude of them to assume we'd be okay being subjected to their racist remarks and was embarrassing to be seen with racists. Iris was pretty flustered at the term racists, but I didn't back down. Anyway, she was at least reasonable and apologized again about what happened, and I apologized that we embarrassed her. And besides some slightly irreversibly ruffled feathers, I think I've at least smoothed things over with her. My dad is another story. He is stubbornly not talking to me until I apologize to his girlfriend's kids. I made my stance clear that I wouldn't, and if he wanted to act like racism against his kids was okay, then I wouldn't be hanging around him anymore or, God forbid, bringing my future mixed kids and his future grandkids around. My sister just sent him a text that said, "Have fun with the racists." She's not good at subtlety. Anyway, that's where things are right now. Not a super good ending, but not necessarily a bad ending either. TLDR. Iris apologized for her racist kids without really acknowledging their racism. Dad being a stubborn fool. Now on to the next story. Story 10. My wife and I recently encountered a significant issue with her parents because they used X39 patches on our daughter without our consent. I know how the title sounds, but please bear with me. Throw away for obvious reasons. I, 24, and my wife, 24, recently had our daughter in July. She is the best thing to ever happen to my wife and we couldn't be more thrilled to have our little bundle of joy. She recently got sick while staying with her grandparents, my in-laws, while my wife and I took a trip for work. For context, my in-laws are really big into LifeWave X39. It's a patch that supposedly helps regrow stem cells by reflecting light rays back into your body, allowing your body to produce more stem cells to fight off diseases and sickness. If you ask me, it sounds like snake oil, and my wife agrees, calling it a pyramid scheme. The only way to get said patches is by spending well over $1,000, and then you're tasked with selling the patches yourself. It's essentially some multi-level marketing product where the more patches you sell, the more money you make, falling right in line with my wife's comparison to a pyramid scheme. But MLMs are somehow legal. Now, I've tried doing research on X39, and the only comments I've seen praise said product are brand new accounts never used before or after, or their entire profile is dedicated to shilling out for LifeWave X39. In my own research, they appear to just be overpriced stickers. They contain no medication, no special UV rays, or anything of the sort. They're literally just an overpriced sticker with an air bubble. But my wife and I have made it very clear that we wanted no part in X39, nor did we want our daughter to have it. Even if it's fake, we wanted no part in it, and on the off chance it did something, I didn't want our daughter to be used as their lab rat or guinea pig. Now, before we left our daughter with my in-laws, we provided them with some infant medication just in case she got sick. Can never be too safe, you know? Well, we returned home from the work trip early because our daughter wasn't getting any better. So we picked her up and went home. We were going to give her a bath. And in the process of taking her jacket off, we found an X39 patch on her arm. Upon finding it, we immediately called her parents and demanded to know why she had a patch on her. Her parents tried saying that it's safe for the baby. We even ordered the ones for ages 7 and younger, and that it's practically medication. Their words, which still didn't answer our question. So my wife checked the go bag, and the Motrin we gave them while it was not used very much at all. Her parents tried claiming that someone else in their group or whatever gave it to their son and they got better in a week. Point is, we didn't buy it, nor did we care. We've made it abundantly clear that we wanted nothing to do with X39, and we didn't want our daughter to be a part of it. They failed to listen. My wife was on the phone with them for over an hour, and while I don't know the exact length the conversation went to, I know it at least ended with her screaming, "You're never going to see my daughter again, and if you attempt to come to my house, we will call the police," before hanging up. That was 3 days ago now, and we've had several missed calls from family members, her parents, her siblings, and even family friends, all saying that we overreacted and they were just trying to help. Maybe we overreacted, but we wanted nothing to do with that, and despite making it clear, they went against our wishes and did it anyway. And instead of giving my daughter actual medication, they tried to give her some placebo patch. Her parents tried claiming that we're stopping them from seeing their only grandchild over something so small, but we didn't want to hear it. Relevant comments. Comment 1. I kind of thank you to us for leaving your sick baby to go out of town. P. We didn't leave a sick baby to go out of town. We left her with her grandparents while she was fine. We only packed Motrin because, as I stated in my post, you can never be too careful. She got sick while we were out of town, not before. Comment 2. You say that like it's snake oil. Like it's just as bad as the X39. Was it Advil and cough syrup? Or just a generic bottle that you wrote infant medication on? You expect us to believe that you gave them medication just in case she got sick and then she immediately got sick? Come on, this sounds like total BS. OP. Her grandparents don't exactly have children's medication laying around. We packed her Motrin, which I quite literally stated later in the post had you read it, not some generic bottle or snake oil. And just as bad, nor do they have the ability to really go anywhere. They live a good 30 to 40 minutes outside of any nearby town. The drive to and from her parents is a grand whole hour drive from where we live, and my wife and I quite literally work with sick people all the time. No, I'm not a doctor, nor do we have medical expertise, so my wife and I contracting something is usually pretty high, so we pack Motrin or whatever the store brand is that we'll buy every time we left her with her grandparents for more than a day. Update 1. About a month ago, I made this post ranting about my in-laws' weird obsession with a, for lack of a better term, cult regarding stem cell regeneration through patches, which clearly isn't a real thing. There's been some development on that end, and while I'm confident things will likely end here, I wanted to give a quick update for those who may have been curious. I'm writing this on the toilet at work, so don't mind the rushing of it all. After my wife essentially cut ties with them and we all received a million phone calls and text messages from family and friends, things quieted down for about a week or two. We started having my sister watch our daughter instead when we had to work. We haven't had another out-of-town trip since the initial post. However, through those couple of weeks, we never really heard anything beyond a couple of supposed shit-talking posts on Facebook bitching about us, but I can't seem to find the posts. We thought things were probably, hopefully, going to end there, but boy were we wrong. And this is quite the jump from the last post. My wife and I were visited by CPS about 2 weeks ago or so after they received concerning calls about supposed child abuse and negligence within the household. Of course, nothing like that happened, and the caseworker was very quick to see that. We had asked who reported her, and while she couldn't say, we had a suspicion it was from her parents. We were completely helpful and cooperative with the caseworker, and after she left that night, my wife called her mom up and asked her if she's the one who called CPS. Surprisingly, her mother took full accountability, but not so surprisingly, tried to spin it around in her favor, claiming that she did it for our own good because our daughter was sick and she wasn't getting any better when she was there, so clearly we were doing something awful as parents. Kids get sick, it happens. But they're also extreme anti-vaxxers, not just COVID, I mean everything from even something as trivial as the flu shot. Yet they're willing to shill out thousands of dollars for some supposed stem cell regeneration sticker. The hypocrisy and irony in there is unmatched. My wife didn't really know how to react to that, so she basically told her mom to go EF herself and she wants nothing to do with her again. I know I saw a few comments on the last post saying maybe we shouldn't have cut them out entirely, but now I'm starting to question why we didn't cut them out years ago before our daughter was even a thought in our heads. About a week after the first audit, my mother-in-law showed up to our house on my day off while my wife was at work and essentially demanded to see our daughter, forcing her way into our home by pushing past my arm when I told her to get the hell out of my house. She had no business marching in here like that. She essentially told me that I'm unfit to be a parent because I'm depriving my daughter of help she desperately needed because she's clearly a very sick child. My daughter is perfectly healthy right now and in fact has had no stuffy nose and no high temperature. Nothing. I told my Emil straight up that she was bats hit insane. I went off on her about how she lied to us, went against our wishes, had the audacity to call and lie to CPS, and then show up at our house unannounced, uninvited, and march herself inside, as well as everything about her X39 LifeWave. We argued there for a while before I finally got so fed up I told her to leave my house before I called the police. She stormed out of the house and in true Karen fashion said, "This isn't over," before slamming my door. I immediately called my wife, who was, of course, irate. The following morning we filed a restraining order at the courthouse from her mom and dad because they're clearly not in their right mindset. The caseworker had to audit us a few more times as per their guidelines over the past 2 weeks. And yesterday was her last day where she informed us that we're doing good and she's sorry for the trouble they caused. We kept her up to speed on the LifeWave, the showing up unannounced, and the restraining order, and though she couldn't really take a side, she seemed apologetic. But my wife and I are pretty livid. We started looking at houses in another state to get as far away from her in-laws as possible. Our company has offices out there, so it's entirely possible we could just be transferred. So we're crossing our fingers that all goes well, the restraining order gets filed soon enough, and we'll get a place clear across the country so that this will hopefully be my last update. Update 2. Things aren't going to be as juicy in this post as the last two. But some new things have happened, so I'll just jump right in. After my in-laws called CPS on us for no discernible reasons other than we forbid them from seeing our daughter, things mostly quieted down. Some of you suggested that we should do more than just get a restraining order, so we bought some security cameras and had them installed all around our property, and our neighbors, who are pretty good friends of ours, were in the loop for the most part. And any time we had to go somewhere, not only did we have video cameras recording every time someone entered our driveway displayed directly on our phones, our neighbors kept us updated too. She stopped coming around for the first few months since she called CPS on us, but just the month before last, as we were preparing to move, my in-law somehow got word we planned on moving states and attempted to block our driveway as her dad tried blocking the front door. Not sure what their plan was there because we have a back door and an extra side door leading from the kitchen, but I digress. Her mom blocked the driveway, stopping our U-Haul or car from leaving the property, and wouldn't budge even after we told them we would call the police. They told us they'd move if we told them where we were moving to, but my wife told them that that wasn't happening and they had 10 minutes to leave or we'd be calling the police. My neighbor came over during the commotion, but my in-laws still wouldn't budge. My daughter is crying during all of this as my wife is trying to console her as my neighbor and I are attempting to remove my father-in-law from the doorway, but he wouldn't move. Eventually, my wife called the police, and I'm guessing another neighbor called them as well, because they responded within mere minutes. My in-laws kept screaming that we were taking their rightful grandchild away and that we'd all be damned to burn in hell for this, but honestly, that just made me laugh. The police kept asking them to leave, but they wouldn't. Eventually, they were arrested for refusing to leave, and the police were nice enough to call a tow truck for us to be able to back out of the driveway. Lo and behold, as the police were handcuffing my in-laws, they both had on those X39 patches, and even the police questioned them about it. But what's done is done. We were able to finally leave and on to new adventures. We've been settled in at our new house for the better part of over a month, and we're enjoying it greatly. No word from her in-laws, and they have no idea where we are. We have them blocked, but we'll eventually get messages from unknown numbers or Facebook accounts asking where we moved, but there's no way they're that foolish to believe we'll actually tell them. Luckily, Neither my last state or this one have any grandparents' rights, so we're in the clear there. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully, this is my last update. Relevant comments. Comment 1. Seriously, look into a P.O. box and have all mail routed there. Hey there, we actually did get our mail routed to a P.O. box. Comment 2. Why were they not arrested for violating a restraining order? We informed the police they had a restraining order. I just don't think they cared. They were more concerned with getting them off our property as opposed to them violating the restraining order. I think one of their final charges after being arrested was violation of a restraining order though. The police just didn't seem to care at the time, which is unfortunate to say the least. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.